Honourable guest attendees, all protocols observed. I'm Knox Chitio, Associate Fellow here with Chatham House. And on behalf of Chatham House, I'd like to welcome you all to this discussion on Zimbabwe's 2023 elections. We are really honoured and delighted to have you here. As we all know, before I proceed, just to say that this event is fully on the record. As we all know, in 13 days' time, Zimbabweans go to the polls to elect representatives of their choice for the presidency, for parliament, and for rural and urban council. So this is an important time, it's a momentous time for Zimbabwe, for Zimbabweans, also for the region, and for the globe as well. So it's a very, very important time. More than 6.5 million Zimbabweans have registered to vote for this election, and that is a new record. 2018, there were just under 6 million voters. So I think this attests to the importance of the election and the desire of people to have their voices heard. The question, though, is how many of those who are registered to vote will actually turn up on the day. That will have to be seen on the day. So as Chatham House, we engage very much on Zimbabwean issues. Those of you who know us, we engage with government, with opposition, with civil society. We've had a number of programs and initiatives in country and now here in South Africa. So we are delighted that we are able to host speakers from political parties and also those who are engaged in the electoral process. So the economy is going to be one of the keystone issues for this election. There's no question about that. And voters will make their decisions based on how they feel things have progressed over the last 5 years for them in terms of lives and livelihoods. If they feel that their lives and livelihoods have improved over the past 5 years, they will vote probably in a certain way. If they feel that their lives and livelihoods have not, then they may vote in a different way. So certainly the economy will be very, very important. But there are other factors. This is not a one-issue election. There are different variables which will inform voter choices as they go to the polls on the 23rd. Some of it may be with regard to party loyalties, or they may want to vote for new parties. There'll be a lot of things which voters will take into account. These polls really are a culmination of an electoral process which has been ongoing over the past few years, and it has included by-elections over the past few years, and they've also been primary elections within parties of who their nominees are going to be. And these have thrown up some surprises, so we may expect, as ever with elections, some surprises from the 23rd and for the next few days after that. The fundamental question, one thing we should, I think, acknowledge is that a few days ago in Harare, the parties signed an electoral peace pact. And I think it's something we do need to acknowledge. I think we need to commend the parties, and I think the churches brought them together for that. We hope the pact will be implemented on the ground, but I think that is an important development. So the voters, this really is the time for the voters, and it is a Zimbabwe season. This election is attracting interest not just in Zimbabwe but from outside. It's a Zimbabwe season. One of the key question I think that the voters will ask is, if you want my vote, what are you going to deliver in terms of lives and livelihoods for me and mine, and also for the country? What are you going to deliver as a candidate, as a political party, for me, for our community, and for the country as a whole? Can you deliver growth? Can you deliver the various things that you are promising? And how are you going to deliver it? So the fundamental question that voters are really asking is, tell us why we should vote for you. And every party, every candidate has got to answer that question from the voters. On that note, we have with us today for session 1, 5 representatives from 5 of the contesting parties for the elections. We are most honored and very grateful for you that you have made time to come here and join us today. We are really, really honored. These are 5 of the contending parties. We have party principals and also spokesperson and secretary generals for 5 of the contending parties. We are really hugely grateful to you all to be here. At the moment, we are missing one of the speakers, which is Madok Chiwasa from the NCA. I believe he's en route, and hopefully he may be able to join us a little bit later on. Fingers crossed that he can. We also acknowledge in the second session, which is on pre- and post-election processes and procedures, we have 4 speakers, and they represent organizations which are on the ground in Zimbabwe, dealing with election processes, voter education. They're also dealing with election monitoring and electoral observation. So their role is equally important because process is prologue to outcome. The 2 things are completely intertwined. So their role is just as important, and we are very grateful to our 4 speakers on panel 2. So I think it remains for me really just to say a huge thank you, and as we say, being a Zimbabwean and this event being about Zimbabwe, as we say, thank you, it's no tender. Ngiyabonga. We are most grateful to all of you for being here. We look forward to a very lively discussion and presentations from our speakers who will tell us what their party platform is for the elections. And on that note, I will now hand over to my colleague, Alex Vines, who will chair this session and introduce the speakers. Thank you very much.
So good morning, everybody. My name is Alex Vines. I'm the director of the Africa program at Chatham House, and I've got the pleasure of chairing this session on party manifestos and policy options. As Dr. Knox mentioned, we have 5 principals and spokespeople of political parties in Zimbabwe. This is a cross-section of parties that are registered for the election. So the criteria is a cross-section here of registered parties. That's the criteria that we decided we could not obviously be fully comprehensive in this meeting. How this is going to work is that each of the representatives of parties here will get 8 minutes each. So there's equity. I have an iPhone stopwatch here, so it's accurate time. We'll allow each to speak for 8 minutes, and then we open up for discussion. We're starting slightly late, so we'll add another 15 minutes onto this session. So please listen attentively. My hope is that each of the participants on this panel talks about the vision for Zimbabwe's future, particularly economic growth, poverty reduction, and providing jobs and employment. I mean, these are really key issues all over this region, and Zimbabwe is not the exception, but I do think that clearly is a priority, which is part of the work we do at Chatham House is also very much focused on economic growth, prosperity, equity. So with no more ado, I'm going to start. You have in your packs already the bios, and so everybody's very distinguished, but please do excuse me, I'm not going to lose time by reading out long bios. But we have here initially, starting on my left, Christopher Muchavangwa, and he's the spokesperson of the Zimbabwe African National Union Patriotic Front, ZANU PF. And as you well know, he served in government with ZANU PF in several different roles. So, Chris, thank you for coming. And I'm about to press my stopwatch. And please tell us about the ZANU PF vision. The floor is yours, starting now. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Alex. Thank you, Chatham House. Thank you, Knox. And I want to salute the various candidates who are here from the Zimbabwe political establishment, which is a testament to the vibrance of our democracy. And it is what you are celebrating here by hosting us. I am from ZANU PF, I'm the spokesperson, and we are going into this election without a written manifesto. The main reason being that we've got work on the ground and our work is speaking for itself. This has been occasioned by the advent of the new republic, the Second Republic. We started off in 2017 when we removed our former president and replaced him with President Mnangagwa, and we brought back the vision of the ruling party. You know, it has been a party which has been around for more than 60 years now. It has delivered almost on all the tasks which the Zimbabwean people would have aspired for. Independence, giving it the state of Zimbabwe, probably one of the best professional armies on the African continent. We also delivered on education, and we also delivered on restitution of resources to the Zimbabwe people, so that there can be alignment of the capabilities of the Zimbabwe population with what God gave them. And this has become the basis of the foundation of our economic policies since the Second Republic. We are harnessing the best human resource index in Africa, a product, of course, of the same party, of the same history. We are harnessing it so that it can exploit those resources, but at the same time, it is identifying capable and competent global investment capacity to come to Zimbabwe, to match what God gave us in terms of resources, but also to exploit this well-developed human resource index, which is Zimbabwe. Our performance as a country in terms of human resources is a matter of envy. You go throughout all the region, the teachers are from Zimbabwe. You go throughout the region, you go to England, you find doctors and nurses from Zimbabwe. You go to Australia, you find geologists from Zimbabwe. You know, we have a labor force which is convertible as the US dollar, a caters of our education. So we really have primed our population to become global citizens in almost every aspect. And the quest for capital has been the preoccupation of the president, Mnangagwa. That's why he adopted the slogan, Zimbabwe is open for business, because without capital you can't modernize a country. And I was the special advisor when this slogan was adopted in 2017, 2018. And the deliverables are there. We have expanded gold production in Zimbabwe from probably 3 tons in 2008. Now we're at 35 tons, and gold has become very important as the geopolitical turbulence is showing. You know, people are looking for a refuge from the US dollar, and gold is the natural money of humanity for 5,000 years. And Zimbabwe has always been at the forefront of using gold as money. That's where we built Africa's greatest civilization in sub-Saharan Africa. It was based on gold, and gold is now supporting our currency, which is insulating it from the predatory aspects of the US dollar, which have marked our currency in the last 20 since we fell out with our erstwhile former colonizers and Western partners in trade when sanctions were imposed. We had to find a new reference for our currency, but history has always helped. We went back to gold. We are much more advanced than China or Russia or even all the other countries in using an alternative currency. And we now have a digital gold currency. We don't need to worry about the US dollars. You know, for your information, we have old Zimbabwe dollar notes for small units, but for $100 notes, all of them are new. They come from New York, they're laid in Dubai. We sell gold, we bring them to Zimbabwe. If you're unlucky, you wipe your cheek, you may get it because they're the printing press in New York. But they've not been sent by the American government. They've been earned by Zimbabweans working hard, because gold is and the beauty about it is we legitimize young people to do gold, and 60 to 70% of that gold out of the 35 tons is being produced by young people, 3 million of them. And we're going to organize them. I was part of their legitimation, when I was the chairman of the war veterans and when I was in Mugabe's cabinet. I emphasize this point because without current stability, you can't talk of any proper economic management. Well, there are other parties which are saying they want to introduce the US dollar. I don't know how they introduce somebody's currency and try to run your economy on somebody's currency when you are not the owner of that fiat currency. We are not using fiat currency, we are using gold, the man of ages in Zimbabwe. And in Zimbabwe, gold is everywhere. You know, and this is the beauty about our economic policies. We are doing the same, extending prosperity to the agricultural sector, taking advantage of the land reform. Just this year, $800 million were exchanged by 180,000 families in the sale of tobacco alone. You know, you can't make any cigarettes of note without this blend of the Zimbabwean leaf tobacco. You know, this is either, everybody who knows about the cigarette industry. I'm not a smoker, you know, there are healthy issues. But look, we have $800 million every year between February and September going to peasants, I mean former peasants, communal farmers. That money used to be shared by 4,000 white farmers. Now this is 180,000 families. So there's a general palpable prosperity in rural areas where solar panels are the order of the day. And then what has also happened is our drive to get world-class companies to come and exploit world-class resources. In Zimbabwe, we are building the largest steel plants on the African continent. We will be in the same league as Turkey or Russia very, very soon in steel production, starting 1 December. We are lithium. We're also doing the same with new energy. What Saudi Arabia and Russia does with fossil fuels is what is going to do Zimbabwe with lithium-ion batteries. So by and large, the president has done well, ZANU PF has done well to match world-class capital to the God-given resources of Zimbabwe, which are abundant, and to also exploit the best possible human resource index on the African continent today, which is Zimbabwe. And that's what will be. Well, that is our manifesto, delivery of prosperity, so that the generation which fought can be vindicated for having made the decision to fight in the 1970s and 80s. I want to thank you.
Thank you very much. Right on the time. Okay, so we have had the ZANU PF presentation. We now move on to Elizabeth Valerio, who is the founding president of the United Zimbabwe Alliance, UZA, a party that was founded in May 2021. Elizabeth, thank you for coming to this meeting, and over to you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to first start by thanking you and Dr. Chitio and everyone else behind the scenes who made today possible. It's a great opportunity for us to be able to introduce our policies as the United Zimbabwe Alliance. So I'd like to also just start by, on a positive note, highlighting that indeed Zimbabwe is a vibrant country. I heard Mr. Mchangwa saying that, and indeed we must be reminded that Zimbabwe is a country with great potential. But we, as the United Zimbabwe Alliance, believe that we are the first political party that will have the mandate and the focus to be able to deliver on our party manifesto. So I'll highlight a few of the things that we are working on and what we intend to do as a government in waiting, as a future government for Zimbabwe, and as your next president for the citizens of Zimbabwe. So before I get to the nuts and bolts of what we're going to do, I'd like to really highlight what differentiates us from any other political party or the government that currently exists in Zimbabwe. We are a political party that's fully focused on citizens' engagement. And we have, for the past 24 months, spent our time canvassing all of Zimbabwe, visiting all of the constituencies, speaking with the citizens, and asking them what they want for the future of this country. So our agenda is driven by the people, the citizens of Zimbabwe. So as I sit here today, I am speaking based on what I've been guided by the citizens of Zimbabwe. We as a political party are also not an activist-driven political party. We don't focus on provoking or agitating any other political party. Our mission is not to cause further, unsettlement of our nation. We want to bring our nation forward as a political party. And so we also focus at the core of our work on unity, and ensuring that we are bringing all parties together to bring their ideas for the best future of Zimbabwe. We truly now are also the only viable new political party in Zimbabwe. We are in 61 constituencies contesting in this election. We would have had a lot more. In fact, 81 of our members of parliament currently are not on the ballot, but were prepared to contest in this election. I won't go into all of those details, but we are a political party that has, in earnest, established itself as a future government for this country. We also are non-violent. You will never find or meet a United Zimbabwe Alliance member who has been accused of violence or has participated in any violent activities. We want to end this historic polarized approach to politics in our country. We want to make sure that we are working together as political parties, shaping a better future for our country. We also do ensure that we are inclusive. So we do not discriminate or prioritize any citizens based on gender, color, race, kinship, or any other aspect of their humanity. We want all citizens to have the same benefits. In fact, as the United Zimbabwe Alliance, our mission, our core focus going into this election was to provide a good life for every Zimbabwean. And we do oppose any forms of discrimination or prejudice. Well, when we look at the manifesto for our country, we've got a very clear mandate. Based on the 6 months that we've been on the ground, we have worked on putting together a document that is comprehensive. It encompasses 4 aspects, the first being accountability and how we will restore accountability in our country. We also are focusing on the advancement of our nation. We want to make sure we bring stability. That's another aspect. And then finally, restoring the dignity of our nation. But in order to address these issues, we had to first look at where we are today. And as a nation, if you reflect back on where Zimbabwe was post-independence in 1980, we were a wealthy nation. We were a nation that actually inherited infrastructure that was quite established. We had a strong economy. We had a strong currency that was actually very competitive in the global arena. We had a healthcare system. We had vibrant industries. We had jobs. We had challenges going into the new Zimbabwe, and those are the things that were supposed to be addressed, making sure we had equality. Today, as we look at where we now are a nation with highly dilapidated infrastructure. We do see roads going in, but it's always just before elections. So these are issues that we are looking at as we address the manifesto for the United Zimbabwe Alliance. We have poorly equipped hospitals. In fact, we do not even have an adequate healthcare system in our country because most of our health practitioners have left the country. I think others speak of us creating a workforce for the region or for the global community. We want to see a very different future for Zimbabwe where the healthcare professionals are retained within our country, and it goes deeper than that. We need to make sure that we are even investing in producing our own medicines, finding our own healthcare solutions, investing in biotechnology, medical technology, producing devices within our own country. We've lost industrial capacity in our country. We did have a thriving steel industry. Zisco Steel has collapsed. You look at our national airline. It is inadequately equipped to compete in the global arena, and we are finding that most of the tourism that comes into our country is brought not by our airline but by other airlines. So we need to address that and ensure that we revive Air Zimbabwe, the National Railway System, the Cold Storage Commission. I could keep going, but the list is very, very long, and I've got 8 minutes, I believe. The monetary system within our country is shameful. We have a currency that now requires redundancies. People are coming up with their own solutions. You go into a grocery store, they're figuring out ways for us to manage and distribute funding within our country. You've got multiple parallel systems. We need a currency that is stable and one that we can all rely on when we are looking at investment within our country. We cannot, even as citizens, look at investing in our nation. Land and agriculture in our Zimbabwe is highly underutilized. and the business sector, when you look to the financial impacts on our nation, you look at the mega deals that come into our country, there's a lot of question when it comes to where it actually benefits us as a nation. It's really opaque, and we do not really understand where the benefits are for the citizens of Zimbabwe. As the United Zimbabwe Alliance, we're coming in. One more minute. We're coming in with a clear plan, a clear solution, a document that identifies ways for us to ensure that we advance our country, we separate the powers within our country in order to ensure that there is no interference with our legal system. So when it comes to accountability, we will have a government that does not politicize the legal system. We will ensure that we address electoral reforms, and we have a comprehensive list of actions aligned with that. When it comes to our currency, we will ensure that we are producing more than we are importing, and that we have a solid Zimbabwe dollar. We will not be relying, and you cannot compete in the global arena utilizing another currency. I think my time is up.
You got 7 seconds. That was somebody else's clock.
But ultimately, as there it goes. Thank you.
If you want to sum up that final point, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Well, as I said, ultimately we want to make sure that every Zimbabwean is really at the core of the government's focus. So rather than Zimbabwe being treated as personal property to a few elite within our country, we want every Zimbabwean to benefit from the resources. We're very concerned about the mass extraction and exploitation of this nation, and we look forward to being able to engage the citizens in building a new nation.
Thank you very much. So the next speaker we have is Fadzai Maheli, and she is the national spokesperson for the Citizens Coalition for Change. Fadzai, thank you for joining us. You have 8 minutes.
Thank you. It's a very good morning to everybody. 2 days ago, President Nelson Chamisa launched our new Great Zimbabwe Blueprint, which is a citizens' manifesto that sets out our policy plan to take Zimbabwe forward. And it's anchored on 5 key values, namely restoration, reconstruction, transformation, modernization, and reconciliation. And in line with those values, we've got 5 key action points that we're going to zone in on. And in my 8 minutes, I'm going to just focus on those 5 points. We've got a 100-page manifesto, which is available on our channels, and you can read in detail about that. The first of the 5-point plan, the first point, to make Zimbabwe a great leadership nation. Currently, Zimbabwe has little or no status in the family of nations. We've been rendered the sick man of Africa. We've been relegated to a mere observer in the global economic discourse. Our economic, social, and political environment are all toxic. 5 million citizens have had to leave the country as economic or political refugees in search of greener pastures. So all the skilled laborers, the doctors, the teachers, the nurses that Mr. Mchangwa made reference to, are actually leaving because their position in Zimbabwe has become untenable. Now, as the CCC, we're going to reposition Zimbabwe in the family of nations, strengthen our role in SADC, the AU, the UN, ensure that steps are taken for us to rejoin the Commonwealth, build a conducive business environment with consistent policies that stimulate production. We're going to ensure that we make Zimbabwe a leader in modern agriculture, introduce advanced farming technology, make Zimbabwe a leader in industry and mining technology, make our education system globally competitive, and drive investment in sport, tourism, and all key sectors. Number 2, we're going to build a consensus state, transform government, and make it work for everyone. Since 2000, we've witnessed the disintegration of the rule of law, abuse of state institutions by the ruling party, gross human rights violations, an inefficient, oversized bureaucracy, elite state capture, and mass corruption. Now, as the CCC, we will implement an inclusive, citizen-driven national vision, including citizen-driven reform to our constitutional framework. We'll introduce and ensure that there's a strong, robust parliament to exercise oversight over all executive actions and introduce an office for the leader of the opposition. We'll build a strong, professional, and independent police service and all state institutions, including the civil service, the military service, and intelligence services. We'll resize and restructure government and ensure that we've got a lean cabinet of not more than 15 members. We'll implement devolution and create a consultative transformation council composed of government, business, labor, and civic society, which will participate as the principal consultative body for government and help in developing policy. We'll obviously reform state-owned enterprises, making them leaner, professional, transparent, and efficient. Point number 3, we'll build an entrepreneurial, productive, and shared inclusive economy. Currently, Zimbabwe is experiencing 49% extreme poverty. This is according to the World Bank. $1.8 billion are lost annually to illicit financial flows, mainly gold. An additional $1 billion is lost through corrupt leakages in state parastatals. And so annually, we lose approximately $2.8 billion, which is enough to clear our national debt in 6 years. We currently also experience triple-digit hyperinflation. I heard Mr. Mchangwa talk about a gold currency. It's certainly not the currency that's being used in our shops and on a day-to-day basis. Now, what will the CCC do? We note that Zimbabwe is not poor, but poorly managed. We'll deal with the fundamentals, restore macroeconomic stability, reduce inflation to single digits, and stabilize exchange rates. What Mr. Mchangwa didn't mention is that Zimbabwe is currently experiencing the highest hyperinflation rate in the world, which is 3 digits. And we're not talking there about a gold currency, we're talking about the Zimbabwean dollar, which is what the law currently recognizes. We're going to reform the central bank, bring about resolution to the debt crisis and the currency crisis, ensure that it's stabilized before introducing a Zimbabwean dollar that actually works for everyone. We'll implement fiscal consolidation and tax reform. We'll restore a savings culture and respect for property rights. We'll invest in modern world-class infrastructure, introduce robust anti-corruption measures and strong independent institutions that ensure that corruption is dealt with and fought without fear or favor. We'll modernize our water systems, energy infrastructure, invest in renewables, and make a huge investment in tech. Number 4, we're going to build social services for everyone. Currently, it's no secret that our public health and public education systems are broken. We have a non-existent welfare system, no social safety nets for the poor and for the vulnerable. As the CCC, we're going to implement free basic primary education, which is actually provided for currently in the Constitution, and also ensure affordable, well-funded secondary and tertiary education for everyone. You'll note that in their pledge, ZANU PF promised free primary education for everyone, and in the last 5 years, they've completely failed to deliver on that promise, along with a number of other promises. We'll introduce a universal national health system that ensures quality public health services for everyone, including a health insurance plan to ensure that it's well-funded. We'll strengthen the district health system, making medication and medical equipment available in all public health institutions at all levels. We'll ensure that there's affordable housing, support for persons with disabilities, and restore dignity for our men and women in uniform. Number 5, we undertake to build a cohesive, united nation for everyone. Currently, Zimbabwe is a divided nation. There's been a heavy crackdown on the opposition. Important national questions such as Gukrahundi remain unresolved. We also have huge human rights violations that took place in the past, like Operation Murambachina, which are yet to be resolved. As the CCC, we undertake to promote national reconciliation, create a rights-based society where human rights are fundamental and guaranteed for everyone, along with ensuring that there's an independent, vibrant media. How will all this be funded? It will be a combination of tax revenue, working with international financial institutions, something that ZANU PF have completely failed to do, introduce public-private partnerships that work, leverage our natural resources for the benefit of everyone, not just a few, foreign direct investment, amongst others. In short, that is our policy proposition for the people of Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let me just turn off the alarm clock. Okay. So our next speaker is Metalusi Hanana, who is Secretary General of the Zimbabwe African People's Union, ZAPU. Metalusi, you have 8 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I will read most of my presentation so that I cover almost everything. I would like to express our profound gratitude as ZAPU to be afforded this opportunity to engage Chatham House once again. This after our late President, Dumiswa Tabenga, represented us in London on the 12th of January 2011. We value this ongoing relationship between ZAPU and Chatham House and your partners in promoting dialogue and the exchange of ideas as an essential component of democracy. Thank you very much. My name is Mtuli Hanana, as already mentioned. I'm with our party's national spokesperson, Son Lovu, and our policy chief, Spatu Ncube. Yeah, as a way of introduction, ZAPU has always transacted political contests on the basis of a set of ideas. We seek to speak to the needs and aspirations of the communities we wish to serve. These ideas are modeled as a statement of purpose or intent and a compass through which the party will navigate challenges in decision-making within the predetermined value systems. Besides, the manifesto serving as a key tool to guide and measure the implementation of programs, it is also essential in enhancing the social contract between those in government and the governed communities through accountability. In a democracy, a term of office should be earned through an endorsement of your value propositions by the voters and not through violence or rigging an election. More importantly, the next election should be an evaluation of the implementation of those promises in addition to the new propositions. ZAPU not only believes this to be the logical way to develop and nurture our democracy, but actually sacrifice life and limb in a bitter of liberation in pursuit of these ideals. A political market dominated by a currency of ideas and proposition kills the black market of vote buying, violence, and intolerance. An absence of ideas, proposition, and accountability gives way to the politics of populism, grandstanding, and intolerance. We as ZAPU will demonstrate, however, that the political market in Zimbabwe is distinctively different. We are not too sure if the market is different or the marketers are different. Where we should have selfless servant and accountable leadership, we have a leadership that promotes obscenity in wealth, characters, and value systems. This then becomes the benchmark for seeking public office and retention to office. That is why those who should be leaders of society have no shame standing naked before the same society seeking votes with nothing to offer besides their dancing skills. For us, a manifesto is public decency. It is public decorum. A lack of it is simply public indecency. Others will mesmerize us today with an ingenious concept of our work, our manifesto wrapped in quality adjectives. We implore you to pay very close attention. It's a very coherent scam. As will be demonstrated by other presenters, all political parties believe in the acquisition of power through a manifesto, but some believe in the retention of power even without it. ZAPU belongs to an exclusive club of authentic liberation movements of Southern Africa. Our forebears fought a liberation war to achieve, among others, universal suffrage, political and socio-economic rights, as well as basic human security rights, which unfortunately have become a privilege in Zimbabwe today. It is on the basis of this background and the founding value of our forebears that we present our manifesto to the 2023 national harmonized elections and beyond. And the theme of our manifesto is going back to basics. So what our manifesto basically seeks to do is to move the country from a system of state security and introduce a human security model. And what we must understand is that since independence, the ZANU government has been destroying the security of of the individuals and buffering the security of the state. And this has been done through a whole lot of things. I mean, starting with a genocide, where the citizens or the people of Zimbabwe became vulnerable to the state via genocide, and where a one-party state was forced on the people through the killing of members of ZAPU, their supporters, and well-wishers. So we are moving away from a model where the state is secure and the people are vulnerable. And ZANU has continued to make sure that the people are vulnerable even through legislation. Now we have a Patriotic Act, and as political actors, we're no longer sure what to say and what not to say in public platforms, because it might be misconstrued as a violation of the Patriotic Act, and we find ourselves in prison like Job Sikala, Chepungari Vume, and a whole lot of other people that are incarcerated, some without trial. So this is what we're trying to move away from as ZAPU, by introducing a human security model, a model where we will not have loans enjoyed by a few, but paid back by the majority through legislation that allows those in ZANU PF to get loans via some farming schemes and stuff like that, for them to fail to pay or even to abuse that money, and then it is the taxpayer that then pays for those loans. So we as a party who are moving away from having a state that is a predator on its citizens, and we are trying to protect the citizen. And we are going to be doing this via 7 key pillars. We should make sure that there is food security, number 1. Number 2, free, quality, and effective education. Number 3, we should have energy security. Number 4, a proper, well-run healthcare system. Number 5, secure economy. Number 6, gainful employment. And number 7, housing. Our non-negotiable fundamentals, we believe that for the above 7 points to flourish, the following values are not negotiable. Democratic principles, number 1. Number 2, national democratic revolutionary legacy. Number 3, Bill of Rights. Number 4, national reconciliation and harmony. We strongly believe that ZANU PF has failed in the last 43 years to build a nation out of a country called Zimbabwe. So there is need for enhancing harmony. There is need for reconciliation within the country. Our country is grossly divided, and the division that we experience in the country as a party, we strongly believe that it is state-sponsored. It is how the state has been thriving by dividing the people of Zimbabwe. So as a party, we are pushing to make sure that we unite the people of Zimbabwe. Number 5, making sure that we celebrate our unity in diversity. We have 8 key pillars, key deliverables. Electoral and institutional reforms. Number 2, major regional corridor projects. A new governance system premised on devolution of power. Number 4, zero tolerance to corruption. Number 5, national defense and security reform. Number 6, end of intolerance and violence in Zimbabwe. Number 7, rural economic development. And number 8, a clear title-based land policy. And as ZAPU, everything that we are doing is founded on land, because our fathers went to war for land, which ZANU has hoarded and taken from both the white farmer and the black farmer for self and personal use. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we do have one spare chair at the moment, and that's Matkok Chivasa. Now, I understand Matkok has arrived at ORT and is on his way in from the airport. So what I'm going to do is open up to Q&A, and when Matkok arrives, we'll give him 8 minutes, and I'll take note of some of the questions that you're asking so that he's also given that opportunity to answer some questions. So unfortunately, for transport reasons, he's not with us right at this very moment. Okay, so now is your opportunity. Remember, everything's on the record, you're being filmed, it'll be there for historical prosperity for your great-grandchildren to watch. So this is your opportunity. The politicians here on the up with me are not debating directly with each other, but there is now an opportunity to raise the issues through the questions. But you, the audience, are in control, yeah? So there is a microphone, and the lady there, the microphone comes straight to you. Do please introduce yourself to us, because some of us don't know who you are. Yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Tabile Dewa. I'm with the Women's Academy for leadership and political excellence while in Zimbabwe. My question is addressed to all the political parties. How did we end up with 11% women contesting as members of parliament and less than 10% contesting as councillors? We have seen women being pushed to the proportional representation seats. We engaged political parties since 2018, and you all promised us that you're going to respect the tenets of Section 1756 and 80 and promote gender equality. But what is on the ground is shocking and disappointing, considering that the majority of your votes come from women. And lastly, we are seeing an increase in cases of human rights violations against women. We have seen some of the political parties here not condemning the violations publicly. We have seen the attacks in Glenview, Budiriro, Glenora, Glenview, even Gut, mostly also in rural areas. Can we get an assurance from all of you that you're not going to see soldiers on the streets post 23 August election, because this will affect women and girls more if there's an outbreak of political violence? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So what I'm going to do is just go down the podium here. Sorry, Chris, and we'll ask each of the candidates to make some response. So, Chris, first.
Maybe the other way around.
Well, no, I think you go first because you've had more time to not speak. Go ahead.
Sometimes I don't know which to answer now. What has been said by my candidates or what is coming from them, because I'm the first one to speak all the time. Anyway, I'll go for it first.
First on this occasion, yeah.
Yes, yes. I do take a serious view about what you've said about the dwindling numbers of women in direct representation in the elections. It's unfortunately, when it's an election, it's a democratic process, and much as we in ZANU PF would have wished to have more women be elected, I cannot go into the mind of the voter and tell the voter to say you must choose a woman, because that would be interference with the democratic process. That's why, as a party, realizing that these are structural issues, there are historical issues, there are cultural issues, there are also issues about women's access to the means to make them possible be elected. These are long-term issues. They need to be addressed with more and more prosperity. We are very much aware that in all the countries where women have participated in decision-making, the happiness index of those countries is the highest, and the Nordic countries easily show that it is worth our while having women in positions of decision-making. I'm a product of the war. I met my wife during the war. When we were training and fighting, there were no bullets for women, there were no bullets for men. We had to train equally. And the position of the woman in Zimbabwe, it's an end one, it's not a reward from a patriarchal society. They end it. So they deserve to be where they should be. And it is really a challenge to the Zimbabwean electorate, to all the parties, and also to women themselves, but also to their men, to see how we can address this issue so that we know our performance with the girl child who has done well in education since independence is also reflected in decision making. I would want also to see what is happening in the corporate world, to see how much of the women is being presented in companies, because it's also part of the whole society. So I'm with you on that same page. Issues of violence and the police, we were unfortunate in 2018 with a good election. Then post-election there was violence, and our police was not really primed to deal with that particular situation. One aspect of it being, of course, we were isolated from the best policing methods which are available in the world because of sanctions. So our police was not well trained at that particular time. And when the violence happened, the young people who were dealing with that situation quickly had to call in the army, when in other countries with the proper training, with proper equipping, we would have called in the police to deal with that situation. We have since addressed it. The police is much better equipped. We have also taken advantage of the easing of the pressure, geopolitical pressure on Zimbabwe to get some of the best police training techniques. I can assure you that if ever such a situation arose, you are not likely to see any prompt recourse to the army. Was when somebody is faced with a situation of law and order, is to deal with law and order first before you deal with other aspects. So we learn from our mistakes, and we're also happy that the geopolitical environment has eased the tendency which was there before by a certain Western countries to say they have a certain favored party in Zimbabwe. That has since changed. The Americans came and assured me that they are now neutral between us and Fadzai's party, which is a good thing. You know, somebody must have lost a friend when we must have won a friend by the neutrality of the Americans. You lost is my game, Fadzai. So look, the geopolitical situation is easing, and we are happy that they are helping Zimbabweans find each other by not trying to choose who is better among Zimbabweans.
Thank you very much. So let's keep on going down the line. So Fadzai.
Thank you. I hope I can answer this question honestly, Alex, without Mr. Mchangwa unleashing the patriotic act on me. I'm joking, half joking. Right. Why do women not participate in politics? Anyone who's been observing the political environment over the last, let me call it 5 years, will have a clear answer to that. We also, what took place with the trio, Joanna Mamombe, Cecilia Chimbiri, Netsai Marova. After coming back from a hunger protest, which was peaceful, they were waylaid by thugs, they were abducted, tortured, and sexually assaulted. They went and reported this incident to the police. The situation turned on them, and they were accused of peddling falsehoods. They were incarcerated for a very long time. The United Nations took notice of their torture and the manner in which state institutions were now being weaponized against them, yet they were clear victims of gendered political violence. Any person, any citizen looking at that will say, oh, it's extremely dangerous to participate in politics as a woman. Look at the example of Jasmine Tofa. All she was doing was canvassing during the by-election period. She was beaten black and blue. The men were able to run away, she was slower, and she was attacked. So the truth of the matter is, Stabile, until we deal with the violent, dangerous political environment, it will be very difficult for women to participate. You tweet something, next thing you're in Chikurubi. The women's section has no running water. You don't have a toilet in the cell. What happens? You're not allowed to bring your children along. Your family is now vulnerable. Any woman looking at that will be like, oh, let me not contest. As the CCC, we've got a very clear gender parity policy, and we went out of our way to ensure that there was representation and tried our best to make the political environment safe for women to participate. But unfortunately, there's very little we can do to stop this toxic political environment, especially when it comes to state-sponsored violence, violence, with all due respect, from ZANU PF, and violence that comes in other ways. Until we address those root cause problems, we're not going to be seeing the constitutional standard of women participation in our political space. So in short, the answer is a structural one. Now, I come to the systemic violence that we're seeing, and I want to make it abundantly clear that the perpetrators of this violence are not CCC. If anything, the CCC are survivors and victims of this political violence. We all saw what happened with Tinashe Chitsunge, the incident in Glenview just this last week, murdered. Why? Because he was wearing yellow. Doing what? Going to a CCC rally. He's not unique. Mboneni Ngube, during the by-election period, he was murdered. Why? Because violence broke out. ZANU PF members started throwing stones, beating out people, and he was killed. To date, the perpetrators of that violence have not been brought to book. This is not unique. We also have the incident of Mo Blessing Ali, asking again about women. Mo Blessing Ali was killed and murdered, again for her politics. So all of those things are things that we condemn as the CCC. We continue to emphasize the need to respect the rule of law, human rights, ensure the election is free, fair, credible, and peaceful for everyone.
Thank you. So the next comments will be from Elizabeth Valera.
Thank you. So I would like to agree in terms of the violence, the perceived violence in politics. And the reality is there is violence in the political space within Zimbabwe. As the United Zimbabwe Alliance, we have also faced situations of violence on the ground where our candidates have been exposed to extreme situations, and when we've reported these to the police force, the follow-up is not done. And so I think the issue really has to be in addressing the responsiveness of the police, the impartiality of the police, ensuring that we actually have a legal system to turn to when such incidents of violence occur. But I think as the United Zimbabwe Alliance, we'd like to see it go a little bit further. We need to make sure that when political violence is, reported, and when there is an investigation done and an individual is exposed, they should not be allowed to participate in violence in politics in the future. We really need to make sure that these individuals are not continuing to participate and have the opportunity to be in our political space. I'll tell you very specifically, we had 5 of our own members that were attacked in Chitungwiza. The MP candidate was one of the individuals. The MP candidate from ZANU PF was one of the individuals that attacked our party members. They are currently on the ballot. And we've reported this to the police. We've been clearly disregarded because after multiple inquiries, we've just been told we're making a follow-up. And these individuals stole cell phones, they abducted our members, they stripped them, they beat them, and there were women amongst them. So this is happening throughout Zimbabwe. We want to see an end to this, and part of the action that should be taken by parties like ZANU PF is to ensure those individuals are not then given the opportunity to continue to participate in politics. And I have it on record that this has been reported multiple times to the police authorities. We as the United Zimbabwe Alliance are very proud that we have the largest proportion of women on the ballot in this election. We had to fight to get myself, the presidential candidate, on the ballot. There were only 2 women that were able to go to nomination court and essentially put their names forward, go through the process, and I am now the only woman on the ballot as a presidential candidate. That is not equal representation for women. We need to have an equal number of women on the ballot at the presidential level all the way down to local governance. And so as UZA, what we've done is we have intentionally sought to support the women within our political party. We provide mentoring and guidance. We really try to make sure that we are, supporting their development. We right now would have had many more women on the ballot because, unfortunately, 81 out of 112 MP candidates that were ready and prepared to contest in this election were rejected due to technicalities and other issues in this Zimbabwe Electoral Commission process. And so we would have had many more women, but we are currently the highest proportionally represented in terms of women. We do want to also ensure that as we go forward, all political parties should be actively working to encourage women to participate in politics. And therefore, that's going to require Fadzi, you and I sitting at the table together and figuring out what do we do regardless of our political affiliations. The same thing with every other political party that is in Zimbabwe. We need to work across political lines to make sure that we are providing support systems, and there are many civic groups as well that are working to do the same. Thank you.
Lucy, please go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you. As far as the involvement of women is concerned in the ballot and in the election process, I would want to first agree with Chris when he says that there is a risky or a dicey principle that we must follow in terms of balancing democracy and affirmative action. I mean, when we are selecting candidates within our political parties, we have to make sure that in as much as we push for affirmative action, we are still able to promote democracy. How then do you say, okay, in this constituency, your candidate must be a woman without violating the tenet of democracy? What if in that particular area people do not want women to contest. So affirmative action, yes, is good, but how do you then balance it with democracy without dragging the internal processes of a party? But that is not an excuse. As parties, we must do more to make sure that women come forward to contest. And what do we need to do? What do we need to do? One of the things that we must do is to make sure that we have a safe environment for elections. And unfortunately, the environment in Zimbabwe is not safe, not only for the woman, but even for the man. That's why the number of candidates, this year has significantly gone down. It could have been the issue of cost, yes, fair and fine, but also it is the issue of the systemic violence that we face. Elections in Zimbabwe are an extreme sport. Politics in Zimbabwe is an extreme sport. All of us here, seated at the front here, I'm not sure, I've not heard anything from your side, Elizabeth, but all of us, including Chris, because of politics, have witnessed or experienced violence one way or the other. The only difference is that Chris experienced what we experienced during the Liberation War. He experienced it under the colonial regime. We are experiencing what they were experiencing in independent Zimbabwe. If you read the story of Fadzai Mahere and what they go through, and the likes of Joanna Mamombe, you will see that they've been going through hell. Even if you were to come to my story, at one time I had to flee in the middle of the night when the state had sent people to me. So politics is just an extreme sport in Zimbabwe. And because of that, we will have fewer and fewer people willing to represent people, willing to speak on behalf of the people, willing to fight for the rights of the people. And if we are to have a solution, the solution must come from the government. The solution must come from ZANU PF. There is nowhere where violence breaks out and ZANU PF is not part of the skirmishes. Everywhere, whether it's CCC versus someone, ZANU PF is involved. ZAPU versus someone, ZANU PF is involved. UZA versus someone, ZANU PF is involved. So the common denominator of violence in the country, we must be unequivocal about it. It is ZANU PF. They preach peace during the day, they unleash violence in the night. So right from 1980, when we came from the war, they have been using violence as a means of electioneering. That's how eventually we had a genocide. That's how we have had Mrambatswina, people disappearing. Actually, I think it should be safe for us to say we have had more black people suffering because of politics in independent Zimbabwe than before, under the hands of ZANU PF. And that must be solved, and there must be a change if we are going to see more women participate. And then you are asking us as political parties to assure you that you are not going to see the army after election results are announced. ZAPU has no control of the army. The people that control the army are in Chris Mswanga's party, unless if ZAPU were to win elections in the future, but we don't have a presidential candidate. So if you want assurances, you'll get those assurances from Chris Mswanga. But what I must tell you is that the default settings of ZANU is that when they run out of ideas, when they are resisted by people, they kill, they unleash violence. It is natural for them. It is how they've been operating since 1980. We know them. So if you want any assurances, please talk to Chris. He can talk to his president, who is on record saying, we are the army, we are the police. Those are the people that can assure you that they are not going to unleash the army. But on our end, as a political party, we are preaching peace. We are asking our members to be as peaceful as possible. Maybe as I conclude, I want to say this. One time, Robert Mugabe went to a place in Kai, and he had a rally. There was a complaint from the chiefs that why are the people so few? Why didn't the people come for this particular rally? Two answers were given. Number one old man stood up and said, these are the people that remained after the genocide. Number two, people are scared of coming out and participating in these processes because at the end of the day, there is going to be violence. They are going to be followed up in their homes. There's going to be a follow-up in their homes to say, who are you, why were you attending and such a meeting. So unless people are sure that the meetings that are being organized are not going to result in them being killed or having their homes banned, they will not going to participate. And the legacy of that trauma, the legacy of that genocide is still there. That is why ZAPU failed to field candidates in most of our rural constituencies, because people were clear. We have died, our relatives died in the past for being ZAPU. We do not want to die again. So we need to have that being solved. And Comrade Chris, it is your party that must play a leading role in solving that. Thank you.
I am going to ask is each of our panelists at the end to sum up and reflect on some of the debate that they've heard here. But I do want to give some time for more of you to ask questions. I'm going to be a little bit more authoritarian in terms of answer time, because I want to make sure that we do have equitable time for audience. So can I see a couple of hands? I'm going to take a couple of questions and cluster them. So there's the there's Prof. Yep. Please, microphone there, the lady with the pen that is standing up, and then behind her, the gentleman. Please, Prof, introduce yourself.
Professor Cheryl Hendricks, the Executive Director of the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation. First, just on a point, or comment rather, getting more women into the electoral processes, into government, is not affirmative action any longer. It is about talking rights. It is about talking universal norms. It's about talking SADC and African Union policies that we subscribe to, and therefore about talking democracy. But you are very right that the number of women decline when there is violence associated with elections, and when the political stakes are high, as is the case now. And so the larger question is, what are we doing around women, peace and security in the context of Zimbabwe? But I want to ask a slightly different question, and it's all of you mentioning inclusivity, reconciliation, reconstruction as part of your manifestos. So I'm wondering what your manifestos are actually saying around security sector reform, transitional justice, processes for reconciliation in your country.
Thank you, Cheryl. And the gentleman behind you, if you just pass the microphone behind you. He's there. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I think it's on. Yeah.
Yeah, it's on. Thank you so much. Thank you for the panelists and for their provocations. So
please introduce yourself so we know who you are.
My name is Sonia. I'm from the Southern African Liaison Office.
Okay.
I'm a senior researcher there. So we realized that observer missions will be deployed into Zimbabwe, or have been deployed already into Zimbabwe. And part and parcel of that is that there were set recommendations stemming from the previous elections, which also resulted in the McClellan Commission report, which was established by the Zimbabwean government. I would like to ask the political parties, in your view, how far have the recommendations of the McClellan Commission been implemented? And when the observer missions leave, will they be able to say the Zimbabwean elections were free and fair, in line with the SADC guidelines and principles for democratic elections, and in line with the African Union Charter and principles on elections? And if yes, if no, where are the pressure points that will result in the international community saying, having a negative outcome on the elections, resulting in them treating it as non-free and fair?
Thank you very much. And I am aware that the AU head of their observer group will be former President Goodluck Jonathan of Nigeria. And I have been talking to the AU about their deployment and their pre-election assessment. So let's do reverse order on the now, so that Chris is last. So Matulisi, why don't you start with the questions about observation, but also security sector reform?
Yeah, I think one of the key things that we must appreciate is that Zimbabwe has always had good ideas and good policies. What lacks is political will from those that are in power. So even if we have these nice sounding statements, as long as we have no political will to implement the reforms or anything, any policy is not going to be implemented. But I mean, you remember that at some point, I think it was Jonathan Moyo who said to journalists that ZANU PF will never reform themselves out of power. So the issue of reforms is now an issue of power retention in Zimbabwe. But on our side as ZAPU, one of the key things that we are vocal about is the issue of national defense and security reforms and many other aspects of reform, including freedom of the press and structural reform. I think page 17 of our manifesto speaks into these things because we feel it is key, it is fundamental, it is important. Over and above the issue of reform, there's the issue of convolution of the state and different organs. ZAPU is a strong and serious advocate of separation of powers, not what we are currently experiencing. So our manifesto speaks explicitly into that to say one of the key principles that we're going to uphold is the issue of separation of powers, where when the courts make a ruling, the state must not even be suspected to have been involved, like what is happening now. Any judgment that comes from the courts, there is suspicion and assumption that somehow maybe the state was involved. When the police are doing their work or the army are doing their work, we are looking at a scenario where it must never be convoluted to say the state is the army, the state is the police, or the executive is the army, or they are deploying anyone. So we are clear about that. We are pushing for it if we are to partner with anyone, because we do not have a presidential candidate on the ballot in this election. If our members of parliament, if our candidates win and they get to parliament, they are going to partner with a party that is clear in terms of the issues of reform and the issues of separation of powers. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth.
Thank you for the question. I think, Tulisi, you've talked about the separation of powers, but I think it does come back down to, really constitutionalism and ensuring that as we, as a government, are looking at the issues around reconciliation or justice or transitional justice, we've got to ensure that we are upholding the Constitution of Zimbabwe. And so for us, a core element of that is just recognizing and understanding citizens' rights. And I think a lot of the the challenges we are facing in Zimbabwe is because we have a compromised judicial system. We do not have, authentic rule of law that is accessible to everyone. I've already mentioned that we view every citizen as equal within our country, regardless of where they come from, what their background is. And we know that there have been citizens in our country that have, been subjected to gross injustice. And so those issues all need to be corrected. But we, as a nation, also need to hold the government accountable for ensuring the equality of every citizen. And that starts with the basic things. As the United Zimbabwe Alliance, we want to make sure that every child is given the same opportunities in terms of the start that they have in life, the education that they're getting, regardless of where they live. And when you think about reconciliation, you've also got to overcome the barriers that some of our citizens face. Depending on where you live, you have better access or better, opportunity. That needs to change, universally across our country so that everyone is given equal opportunities. We need to think about, freedoms that we right now are slowly seeing eroded in our country. These draconian laws that are being put in place. These are all barriers towards ensuring that every citizen has the ability to thrive, to participate meaningfully in our nation. We also need to look at the safety and security, the dignity, the stability of our nation in terms of the citizenry. So as UZA, we like to deal with issues by saying the individuals involved should be the ones to come up with solutions. So rather than imposing solutions on particular instances, we want the citizens themselves to be able to help us find the solutions, sitting at the table, being heard and having their voice heard in terms of finding the way forward. I'm going to come to the question of the observer missions, and it for me is a lot like when I work in the tourism industry and historically have been a conservationist. I've been very concerned about protecting wilderness and wildlife. And we always say, you know, when people are not on the ground and actually seeing what's happening in these tourism spaces, it's very easy for poachers to come in and poach our elephants, or you start to see teak trees being cut in forests and that sort of thing. But it's the same sort of thing with the eyes on the ground, with the international observers being, you know, physically able to listen to and hear from us as political parties the challenges we're facing. I think it does call attention. What the impact of the this will be in Zimbabwe is very complex because, you know, again, we are operating within an environment where there are so many restrictions. There's a lot of lip service paid to what is going to be done in terms of follow-up or addressing the issues that we are facing in our electoral system. So I think, again, it remains to be seen the impact and the effectiveness of those that are on the ground. But we as a political party are glad and happy to have individuals who are, you know, looking into and concerned about the discrepancies that we're seeing in this electoral system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Fedzai.
Thank you very much, Alex. I'm going to give my response in two parts. Deal first with what was raised by Professor Hendricks. I obviously want to agree that women participation in the political space, it's not a negotiation, it's not affirmative action, you're not doing everybody a favor, but it's a constitutional imperative in Zimbabwe, it's a matter of rights, and it really is an obligation upon all institutions involved, from political parties at the state, to ensure that the environment is conducive for the participation of women. Now, what have we as the CCC done to ensure that? We have a gender parity policy that made conditions as safe as they could possibly be in the candidate selection process for women. And there were no reports of women complaining that they were ousted on gender grounds. There were no incidents of political violence against women. And for that, we are quite grateful. But there remain the structural questions that make it the overarching violence in the political space that will make it undesirable for women to get involved. And it does come down to reconciliation. And in this regard, reconciliation is a key value of our manifesto. We've got a whole section dedicated to the sort of mechanisms we believe should be put in place to ensure that we have a consensus state. We have more deal with a lot of the polarization that we continue to see. Coming now to the question of the Motlanthe Commission, I think it's regrettable that most, if not all, of the recommendations, in fact, let me say most, were not implemented. Let's talk first about their recommendation around accountability. The persons who are found to have been responsible for commanding the military unit that conducted those killings, they were never brought to book. In fact, some of them were rewarded with ambassadorships. That accountability element was not dealt with. And so you see this continuation of the culture of impunity for these wrongs that are consistently done, and yet people lost their lives, not once, but twice. We saw what happened in 2018. We saw what happened then in the fuel riots of 2019. We sincerely hope this won't happen. Another recommendation that they made was around the speedy transmission of results. You'll recall that the violence took place. There was a delay in the results announcement mechanism. And as the CCC, we've consistently flagged as an electoral reform issue the need to ensure or reform the results announcement mechanism in Zimbabwe so that there are no delays, to ensure that it's transparent and that technology is at the forefront of making sure that that's done. Unfortunately, we have not seen those amendments. When the electoral reform bill was tabled in the last bit of Parliament last year, it wasn't part of the issues, and we consistently raised it. Unfortunately, it wasn't dealt with. Another issue that the Motlanthe Commission recommended was around a multi-party reconciliation initiative. That simply was ignored. President Nelson Chamisa is on record for years saying that there is need for dialogue between especially the key political parties to deal with the root causes of some of this violence, to ensure that we've got peace. But as one of my other colleagues, I'm glad that they were saying it, because when the CCC says there's all this violence, they think that we are maybe, I don't know, being crybabies or whatever it is. I'm glad that the that we have is the experience that all political actors that aren't ZANU PF are experiencing. And as my colleague from ZAPU said, the common denominator is a single one. It's ZANU PF. They're the people whose leaders say, crush the CCC like lice. They're the people who preach violence. Even if you hear some of the meetings and what's communicated there, it's violence. And as a result, we see violence in rural areas, the burning of homes, the beating of women and children. All of that has to stop. So we certainly call implementation of the Motlanthe Commission recommendations. We can't keep going round in circles as Zimbabwe. We can't continue to have the same post-election violence we saw in 2008, we saw in 2018. We need to move forward from this cycle of disputed elections and for once have a free, fair and credible election that assures democracy and constitutionalism for everyone.
Thank you. Chris. ZANU has been mentioned quite a bit by the panelists.
Well, in Shona, or they say, Anebora and Anemakwa. You see, we happen to be the ruling party. We are the part of the history of Zimbabwe. And naturally, you know, we brought democracy and people want to be rulers also. That is, it should be the aspirations to be rulers by the various parties which are being represented here. And the way to become a ruler is to win elections. So you must go into, you know, we're getting into the elections now. You fielded your candidates, you hope your presidents win, or where you are the president yourself, you win, hope your candidates win, you have a majority in parliament, and all these things which you are pillaring ZANU about, you can then be able to address them when you are in power after the elections, you know, because that's why it is a democracy. That's why you are here. We can't change the laws of Zimbabwe to suit you so that you get into power. We had a constitution in 2013 in which all the parties participated, including, of course, the MDC, which is now running away to become the CCC. They were part to that constitution, and it is the one which is operating in Zimbabwe. I don't want to know why they are now trying to find fault with a constitution which they were participating in, simply because they cannot make that constitution give them power, because the power comes from the voter. So rather than complaining to an audience who have come here about your gripes, left, right, and center, you know, I would rather you quickly fly back to Zimbabwe, you go to the electorate, you convince them of your arguments which you are giving here, and the electorate votes for you, and all the things which you have on your laundry list about what ZANU PF has done to you badly, you then correct it when you are in power after 23 August. That is, to me, the soundest way I can advise my colleagues here. I'm not a romantic about the realities of state power. I left university to go and fight. I was a lawyer, trying to become a lawyer, and I spent 5 years in that war. Out of every 5, I went to war with only 2 came back alive, and another 100,000 Zimbabweans lost their lives to be where we are. We will not be taught democracy and the virtues of democracy by anybody when I actually spent all my life fighting for that democracy, to make it even possible for the people who are here to be listening to Alex Vines and Chatham House. They would not have done it in colonial times. You know, there seems to be nostalgia here about the beauties of colonialism, which I'm sensing from some of the questions, but also everybody tries to say the history of Zimbabwe starts in 1980. It doesn't start in 1980. It starts before 1980. And if there are heavy hearts about who has grievances which need to be sorted out in the history of Zimbabwe, it is my generation before 1980. We have heavy, and they were not sorted out. The white population and its racist policy for that particular time, they were let scot-free by the same countries in the West which are now championing these groups which are here, and some of them which are here saying democracy, democracy, this, democracy, that. They were all supported by the Western countries at that particular time. There is historical injustice which has never been addressed about what we went through with my generation, so there's selective amnesia, mental amnesia about Zimbabwe. Everybody wants to start after 1980. We want to, if you want, we open the whole book, we go backwards. And for us as ZANU PF, the focus is on prosperity for the Zimbabwe people, especially with the advent of the new Second Republic. I've seen two dictators, the back of two dictators. The first one was Ian Smith, as a young man, and the second one was Mugabe. So I can't be told about how to remove people who are baddies from power by anybody who has never achieved that. The parties which are complaining too much, they spent 20 years trying to remove Mugabe and they couldn't remove him. We, the war veterans, decided that we wanted him out in 2, and in 20 months we had him out. So we know the practical realities of dealing with state power. It also comes to the same. We didn't find the Zimbabwe state, the state of Zimbabwe, it was not given to us. It is not inherited like some of the African states. We fought for it. Its place there is by right of fighting. And for you just to come from somewhere and say, I now want the state of Zimbabwe to be reformed to suit my circumstances, I say, go the same way we did. You go and fight the Zimbabwe state, go outside the country or go for wherever you want and you fight it, then you form your own state. For us, the Zimbabwe state is the basis of the stability of Zimbabwe. It has made us possible withstand some of the worst possible pressure of an African country, 22 years of sanctions and Zidera. We wouldn't have done it with the states which are being advocated here. They would have been very vulnerable. Finally, you see, there are all sorts of NGOs and research institutions which are asking questions. I don't know who funds those research institutions. So the questions have got a bias which has nothing to do with how to bring prosperity to the people of Zimbabwe, but more to do with what you, in your mind, should be the ideal state of Zimbabwe. We want to bring prosperity. We are working on policies to bring prosperity. And that's what ZANU PF is going to run on the ticket. And we are going to win on 23 August, based solely on that, because the vote is what matters, not what comes from think tanks, I think.
There were two technical questions too, which one was on security sector reform, if you just want to kind of reflect on that one, and there was one about the importance of international observers. If you have a perspective on both, that would be good.
Security sector reform, I've already referred to.
You did in your, yeah.
We formed our state through blood and iron, the Zimbabwean state. We were not given our state by the British, so it is a product of the sacrifice of the people of Zimbabwe. So please respect our state as it is. The security which makes Zimbabwe one of the most peaceable African countries comes from that security, from that state. And our population is organized because it's a product of war, because they fight and overcome a superior organization from the Western countries, which was the Rhodesian Army. So it is a record of achievement. We will not besmirch our record of achievement to appease anybody who thinks the Zimbabwean state should be this or that. That is a closed file, and you can pay to the moon about the Zimbabwe state. We are happy with it, and it is giving the security which the country needs. So security sector reform, forget about it. We will only. We constantly reform according to our historical circumstances, according to Zimbabwe, not some dictates which come from people who never had anything to do with the formation of that particular state. So dream about other things. Stop about security sector reform.
Okay. And international observers,
international observers, look, they are
the AU, SADC. Sorry, the phone off. Yep.
We, as much as possible, seek to comply with what the observers say. They are in Zimbabwe, they are doing their job. I don't want people here to become a substitute of those institutions. They have their own spokespeople, those particular institutions. And they are in Zimbabwe today observing those elections. Why don't we respect their autonomy and their integrity? Why do you want now to become the substitute of those institutions? I think.
Thank you very much. Now, I do hear that Matcock has arrived. He's going to get mic'd up, is he? So I'm going to ask one question to all the all the panelists while we're getting Matcock ready for his 8 minutes. And I'll ask, we'll start again with Matulusi. parties signed a peace pact. What does that mean to you?
I think the peace pact.
Go ahead.
For us as a party, it's our commitment to say we are a party that is founded on peace and non-violence and following the laws of the country. So that is what it means to us. But also it is a plea to other political actors to also respect the sanctity of life and allow the people of Zimbabwe to express themselves in an election without any form of intimidation or violence, and in its different forms. I mean, we already are experiencing quite a number of aspects of violence, and as a party we are saying we are committed to non-violence, and we are inviting all the other parties to come to the party. But we also know, I mean, we can spend a lot of time debating the issue of peace and violence when the perpetrator of violence is known. And it's actually sad for us, particularly as a generation that, in my party, that is a product of fathers that went to the war. When the same fathers are now, when we complain to them to say, you are becoming to us what Smith was to you, and they are telling us to be violent and take up the gun and do what they did. I think this is sad. It's embarrassing to say the least, but we will do whatever it takes to get our freedom the same way our fathers did. That is an assurance. Comrade Chris, you did whatever you did to have the Zimbabwe that we have, and we will do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Peace pact for you, Elizabeth.
I was privileged to have actually participated in the ceremony signing the peace pact. And for me, that just reminded all of us that before everything else, when it comes to elections, we are Zimbabweans. And even after this election, we will remain Zimbabweans. I know that going into this election, there's a tremendous amount of anxiety, and it gave me a little bit of comfort knowing that ZANU PF, CCC, MDC, United Zimbabwe Alliance, ZAPU, we were all sitting at the table. We removed our political jackets, and there were many other political parties, and we all agreed that we would go to this election, not as if we are going into a fighting ring to war, but we are going to be going into this election to give the Zimbabwean citizens the right to choose their future leaders, the right to choose their president, their parliamentarians, and their local government. And I'm really surprised sitting at this table hearing some of the remarks that came from Mr. Mchangwa, because I thought going into elections this is a contestation of ideas, but I see that many still have a very stern war mentality. We are past the war. That happened in 1980. I was a young girl. I witnessed it personally. A child who had parents that were multiracial. I understood the premise of why we went to war, and people gave their lives for that. They gave their lives for Zimbabwean citizens to be able to go to elections and choose their leaders. And so I remind every single member of the current government that they have a mandate to the people. They are answerable to the people. And the actions that we are taking today ultimately have implications. The citizens are watching. We want to see Zimbabwe, because of this peace pact, honoring the principles of the 12 pledges that we made, and that should be every member of every political party. As we sit here today, people are planning throughout the nation to have additional ceremonies signing these peace pledges, but it starts with the most senior leaders and them then carrying forward their commitment to a peaceful election.
Thank
you.
you.
It was a very significant experience.
Thank you very much. Madcock, welcome. What does the peace pact mean to you? We're going to give you 8 minutes in a moment, but the peace pact for NCA, please just reflect on that for you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for inviting the NCA to this platform. My name is Madhuk Chiwasa. I'm the Secretary General for NCA. Also sorry for coming late. I was delayed by the airport. So from our position as NCA party, you would know that we just started to be a political party in 2013. And we can say probably it's now a long time, but as far as politics is concerned, you will see that we will be almost in our infants stage, if you want to put it that way. So we believe that...
Matt Clark, I'm going to give you 8 minutes after this to talk about the vision of NCA for elections. So just the Peace Pact at the moment, if you can just...
Yeah, that's where I am.
Okay,
actually,
good.
That's where I am.
Okay.
That's where I am. So I was trying to elaborate that movements such as ours, obviously they value peace. We're still starting, we don't have the numbers. So even if we did not want to be peaceful, we cannot afford not to. So from our position, we believe that in Zimbabwe, what needs to be done now is that we must have our elections in a peaceful manner. And as NCA party, we believe that it's everyone's democratic right to choose leaders of their choice. I will agree with the President when I got in what she was saying, that obviously we have got this problem that our elections in Zimbabwe, there's a lot of fear. When we move around campaigning there, we hear people saying that they're being told that if you don't vote for a certain political party, then you're going to be victimized, they're always going to come back. Such sort of very vague things. And I will agree, I will say it again with what the President was saying, that we start to doubt whether we even need to get into those elections if we have got other players not sincere about peace. We believe that any election to be free and fair, they need to be peace. And as NCA, we are committed to peaceful elections. We have never had any NCA member, even on social media, insulting any other member from another political party.
Matt Clark, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Fatsai.
Thank you. The CCC's signing of the peace pledge is an expression of our continued commitment to Zimbabwe being a constitutional democracy, whereby we commit to attaining power through a peaceful, free, fair, and credible election. It was also our clear statement to the perpetrators, especially of violence, that no person should be killed for their politics. No citizen should be killed for wearing yellow. No person should be persecuted, as we've seen with Job Sikala, for believing in a better society. President Nelson Chamisa has consistently stated that we believe in the values of the liberation struggle. And a key one of those values was that there should be one man, one woman, one vote. That's the one man, one woman, one vote that we're calling to be respected in this 2023 election. Allow citizens to make their choice without violence, without intimidation, without harassment, without any of the electoral manipulation that we've seen in the past. And I just have to comment on some of the rhetoric that Mr. Mchangwa used. He calls us Western-sponsored. He uses all this tired rhetoric that he uses to slur against the CCC. The truth of the matter is, no Zimbabwean needs any foreigner to tell them the meaning of dignity, that their life matters, that they should not be persecuted for fighting against poverty, injustice, and corruption. The truth of the matter is that the CCC is citizen-driven, citizen-funded, and we're going to continue to peacefully and constitutionally move to ensure that we've got a citizens' government that works for everyone following the 23 August election. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, the Peace Pact.
We are very happy that we had a peace pact. It is in the best of the Zimbabwean democratic traditions. I earlier on referred to what we did with the new constitution in 2013, which was a collective effort of all the political parties in Zimbabwe. And what I can tell you with confidence is if Zimbabweans are left much to their own means, they will find themselves, and they will always do something which will surprise the world. Like we surprise the world by uniting once hostile armies into one army. The UN would later follow that template about solutions in geopolitics. So we are a very creative nation which is prepared to play its global role when responsibilities are entrusted upon us, but when there's no outside interference. I alluded earlier on to the fact that I received the American embassy and they came to ZANU PF, of all places, after 22 years, to come and say in this election, We are neutral. We are neither for the CCC or for ZANU PF or for anybody. This was a superpower owning up to what was in the past was a role of partiality in Zimbabwean politics. People are trying to refuse not to be associated with that superpower now, but they came and owned up themselves to ZANU PF, and we are very happy with the American position because it helps eases the political situation in Zimbabwe when the big powers, particularly those with a record of question about engagement in Africa in the past, are seen to be interfering in the African politics. This is a good thing for us, and we want to encourage it that our relations, as we re-engage and engage, we get an easier and more accommodative international atmosphere to make it possible for Zimbabweans to get on without some people feeling that they are favored babies of Washington or London. By the same token, this is 22 years, the most sanctioned country in the world after Cuba, consistently, is Zimbabwe. By who? By the American Congress. Who goes to the American Congress to go and champion those sanctions and is seen with legislators of a foreign country saying sanctions are good for my country? It is a party called CCC. Then they now come here and say, we are homegrown. Why are you homegrown if you are going to be hobnobbing in a foreign legislature about imposing sanctions on your country? Then afterwards, the economy slumps because we've been cut out of the international financial institutions. And you now want to say we want to be part of international financial institutions. What does Zidera say? You must return land to the whites so that we can remove Zidera. This is a condition in Zidera. And you know, and this party, CCC, they don't want to mention those things. People should not be engaged in dissimulation. What we have done as Zimbabwe, as ZANU PF, is to take advantage of a more flat international capital and economic environment to diversify friends and to take advantage of the fact that most of humanity has revolved between Europe, Africa, and Asia. And Asia is prospering. And I was ambassador to China, new Luquist policy. We have started investing in Zimbabwe on a scale never known by an African country today. And those who felt that they right to Zimbabwean resources, and they use all sorts of think tanks to try to make Africa become indigent. We are getting rid of that by simply making sure that our economy performs. We are performing very well. And I have been central to most of those investments by the most competent companies in the world to applying their resources on Zimbabwe, to make made in Zimbabwe goods for the global market as good as any from any other country. That's our focus. These other issues, human rights, making the Western countries happy, this and all that, you can live with that. That doesn't bring bread to Zimbabwe. For ZANU PF is winning the elections based on deliverables to the population and making Zimbabwe a global citizen in economic affairs. Thank you.
Yes. So we now will give Madcock, Chivasa the 8 minutes that each other presenter has got. So Madcock, I've got a clock here. I'm going to invite you, please remain seated where you are, to provide a vision for the future of Zimbabwe from the NCA perspective. Sorry you had airport problems, but we're all very grateful you made it. And so thank you for that. So your 8 minutes starts now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you once again. Thank you to the organizers for inviting the NCA party. The NCA party is a social democratic party. Obviously, that is in English, but it doesn't mean much. What it simply means, I guess that probably before me, some speaker probably could have also claimed to be one, or speakers could have claimed also to be probably social democratic parties. So social democratic party means that in all our policies, we look at the poor person. That's what social democracy means. It means that all the NCA policies, the vision for NCA for a better Zimbabwe, any policy must be central and should be determined by the position of the poor person. What we're saying is that if someone is poor, they should be able to send their children to school, for example. If someone is poor, they should be able to say that if they get sick, for example, they can also go to hospital. If is there any medication that is needed, then they should be able to get that medication. We are also saying that a poor person should be able to eat whenever they are in their household. They should be able to have a decent meal as a family, have breakfast, have lunch, have supper. That is our vision. So I want to elaborate how that can be achieved. What it means is that we believe that, for example, education must be for free, because a poor person does not have money to send their kids to school. So if education is for free, it means that even if you are a poor person and you happen to be a Zimbabwean, then you should be able to send your children to school. We are also saying that things like medication should be accessed for free. There should not be a situation whereby someone gets to a hospital, they are asked to pay probably certain amounts, they are also supposed to pay for the medication. That should not happen. We are saying it should be for free. Then obviously, before I even elaborate, it will look far-fetched, but it actually happened before there in Zimbabwe. People used to go for school for free. When I was, myself, I'm now 44 years. I remember that from grade 1 to grade 7, we'd have a situation where if you finish the book that you'll be using, you get a new one. You simply need to show a teacher that I finished my book, you get another one. I finished my pen is now, then you are given another one. So when this country used to be run properly, before it was destroyed by ZANU PF, these things used to happen. And now, obviously, the problem is that if you ask anyone in Zimbabwe why it is not possible to get free education, why it is not possible to get free health care, the only people who will be against that will be ZANU PF. So, obviously, our vision, again, as the NCA, is a nation where we are going to try other leaders besides ZANU PF. That is a clear vision that we have. When we started in 2013, we're clear that Zimbabwe needed new leadership. And the leadership that was there then, as far as we were concerned, was selfish, was self-centered, just looked at themselves. That's why we have a constitution that was dictated by the leaders of the time. During that time, ZANU PF was being led by President Mugabe, and the main opposition was led by the late Morgan Tsvangirai. So when you look at it, it's even very unfortunate that we have got a constitution that was dictated by people who are even no longer there. Sad enough though, we tried as the NCA to stop that. So I'm getting to my next point, that as NCA, we also believe in constitutional democracy. That is why we became a political party in 2013. We became a political party in 2013 because we had realized that in Zimbabwe there was no political party that was serious about the rule of law, for example, that was serious to get a consent that was coming from the people. That's why we have a constitution which was dictated by the politicians of the time, as against just giving people a chance to write their own constitution. So that's why you have some of my colleagues in the opposition, they will cry about ZEC. But I can tell you that the roles, the duties of ZEC, as in the constitution, is what was agreed between ZANU PF and the opposition that was there. And it's exactly what we rejected as the NCA and said, no, look, we can no longer have another constitution being called a new constitution, where a sitting president is the one who appoints ZEC chairperson or ZEC commissioners, where a sitting president has got a final say in terms of appointment of judges, for example. So these are just examples I'm giving you. So as NCA, we envisage a situation whereby Zimbabweans should get another chance to write a proper constitution, a constitution that is democratic. The constitution that we have is not democratic. It's the constitution that protects ZANU PF interests. That's why we are now getting to an election where the commission has been appointed by one of the players, because the current ZEC that is there is good. You cannot distance it from the sitting president, President Emmerson Mnangagwa. So you can't have an election where one of the contestants actually has got control over the people who are running that election. To expect those people to declare that person a loser. I think it will be so far-fetched as far as we are concerned as NCA. And this is the basis that actually made us to be a political party. As NCA, we believe that Zimbabwe needs a base. That solid base can only come if we have got a democratic constitution. The constitution that we have is not democratic at all. And it will be strange, I want to repeat, it will be so strange if elections being run in Zimbabwe under this constitution will produce any other winner, which is not ZANU PF. And I don't want to say a winner, actually. They are not winning the elections. They are manipulating the elections using the constitution. They are manipulating the election using undemocratic means. Can you believe that?
1 minute more,
Okay. We've got a situation by when we were campaigning now. I think probably my colleagues mentioned it. You put up posters there, they are removed. You are moving, you've seen some videos there, Triple C people campaigning. Then there's a ZANU PF person actually chasing them away. We cannot call that election. If these people don't want the election, then obviously we should not go to an election. So NCA, I think I want to conclude is saying that as NCA party, we envisage a situation by at least we are going to, in future, have credible elections. The elections that we are going to get into, they are not credible on the basis that they are being manipulated and controlled by ZANU PF. I think I'll end there.
Thank you very much. So we've run out of time now, but I want to thank our panelists, and particularly Madkot, because of the really difficult journey you've had. I'm so glad you're here. Please do talk to him. We're going to have a quick turnaround into the next session. You're going to have a good chair, Hosseini Delamini, who's chairman of Masmat Holdings, for the next session. That in itself will tell you the interest that we all want of a prosperous Zimbabwe and prosperous Southern Africa, that private sector is with us in the room. So I'm very grateful for Hosseini agreeing to chair the next session. No more ado, I think we should show the customary appreciation to the whole panel, and particularly Madkot.
Panel comprising colleagues and friends that some of whom I know and admire the work that they do. It's really a great honor and privilege. I will do as my predecessor was sitting on this chair did, and just request you to look at their very illustrious profiles in the documentation that's in front of you, their CVs, because I was saying to Barbara, if I were to read all these impressive CVs, could probably take half of the session, but I'd rather not, because we are all here to listen to them and also to engage with them. I would like to, without further ado, just introduce them briefly. I've got Barbara Bebe, just on my immediate left. She is the Executive Director of the Election Resource Center based in Zimbabwe. And I've got Siposami Malunga, who is Director of Programs at the Open Society Africa organization. And we're very pleased to have you, Sipo, here as part of the panel. And then we've got Munjodzi Mutandiri, who is the Senior Program Advisor at the Southern African Liaison Office. It's a great honor and privilege to have you here, Munjodzi. And last but not least, we've got Martin Kasire, who is the former head of electoral support at the Commonwealth Secretariat, and has got a wealth of experience on matters that have to do with elections. We were speaking earlier on before the session with Martin, and one of the points that came out in our discussion was that actually having free and fair elections is cheaper than investing time and resources in resolving conflicts. And the second point was that actually having free and fair elections is actually an important mechanism to actually even prevent conflict from happening in post-electoral times. And that was very much related to our theme for this panel, which is pre- and post-election processes and procedures. I will do, as it was done during the previous panel discussion, and I'll request each one of my colleagues to open up with some remarks for 8 minutes. I've got my monitor here, set up, and if you exceed the 8 minutes, I'll draw your attention to that. And without further ado, I'm going to start with you, Barbara, and say the stage is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope that I'll be able to say what I need to say in the 8 minutes that has been provided. My name is Barbara Ontibile Bebe. I am the Executive Director of the Election Resource Center. As I sit here this afternoon, I would like to point out that the organization that I work for is non-partisan. We are not controlled by anyone. We are not an agent of the West. And whatever we do, we are doing it. The work that we do in the country is to improve the democracy of our country. Having been born after independence, I love my country, Zimbabwe, and the work that I'm doing, I'm committed because of the love that I have for my country. And let me also just say that we should not have sacred cows when it comes to criticizing the things that are not going well in our country. The Election Resource Center has been monitoring the electoral environment in the country, and we have been doing this based on 4 pillars. The first one is we have been monitoring the openness of the electoral environment. We have been monitoring the conduct of public institutions in promoting credible, free and fair elections in the country. We've also been monitoring the independence, the conduct of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission in the post-2018 harmonized elections. And lastly, we've also been monitoring the conduct of the political parties in the electoral environment and the impact that has in promoting a free, fair and credible election in Zimbabwe. Just to share a bit of information in terms of what some of our findings and observations have been. The campaign period has generally been calm, with isolated incidences of violence. That this is in comparison to previous elections. But we are now seeing an increase in violence. And last week we did issue a statement as the Election Resource Center, really condemning the murder of a CCC activist, Tinashe Chitsunge. We believe that elections should not result in the loss of lives of anyone in our country, and we stand by that position that the murder of the CCC activist is not something that was right. We have seen that the government has opened election observation to both regional and international observers, 46 countries, 17 continental and regional bodies, various political parties, 51 embassies, 9 consulates, 50 foreign media agencies. This is a positive development, and would like to applaud the government of Zimbabwe for doing that, as it is going to enhance the credibility of the election. But however, we have seen also mixed signals from the government in terms of how they are receiving or how they have been commenting about the role of observers in the country. Just yesterday, I read an article where the Carter Center Observer Mission was being criticized for being, for taking a certain position. And we think that if the Zimbabwe government is to invite observers in the country to observe the elections, then those observers must be allowed to play their role. The European Union Election Observer Mission has already deployed about 46 long-term observers. Regional observer missions such as the SADC Electoral Advisory Council, that is SIAC, and the African Union and COMESA, they recently conducted their pre-election assessments and offered their own recommendations. The Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission has reported about 61 related cases related to political violence, and I think you would agree with me that this figure is really low compared to the previous elections. We are facing a highly litigated election. There are concerns that the courts are being used to block candidates and to eliminate competition in the election race. Probably some of you know of the Sevia Kasukuwere case and the CCC 12 case. The CCC candidates for Bulawayo who had been removed from the ballot, and thanks to the courts that they eventually were put back on the ballot. We have also seen gender exclusion that has really widened for this particular election. I think the previous panel did speak to this, with only one female presidential candidate out of 11 candidates. Maybe now down yeah, actually out of 11 candidates, despite the fact that Monzora did pull out. And this is something that I think needs to be addressed. We've also seen that the judiciary has set up about 76 trial magistrates for politically motivated violence and intimidation cases as per the Electoral Act. There are perceptions that the judiciary is biased in its conduct. We've read of reports from particularly opposition political parties to this effect. There are also accusations that the Zimbabwe Republic Police has been using the Maintenance of Peace and Order Act to suppress opposition political parties. Okay, I'll try and finish in 2 minutes. And we've seen that a number of opposition political parties' rallies have been banned, but also the ruling ZANU PF party has come out to say that they've had about 86 rallies that were banned, but we've not seen evidence to that effect. The opposition has put in the evidence publicly. You can see it on different social media platforms. And allow me, as I'm about to close, to just comment a bit on the conduct of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. The Commission did release a very clear roadmap for the 2023 elections, and I would like to comment that they have really tried to stick to that roadmap. There has been positive collaboration between ZAC and civil society. We've seen that ZAC has been very responsive to our requests as civil society, and I'm speaking from our position as the Election Resource Center. Each time we send in a request to the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, we do get responses from them. We've seen that, but we do have a bit of concerns. Concerns around the independence of the Commission remain. There are also concerns about how the Commission conducted its delimitation exercise, how it interpreted the formula that the Commission used, and the result, the report that came out of the process. Those are concerns that we've had from stakeholders. We've also had concerns concerning the release of the polling station lists, which was released on 2 August. And I think as citizen observer groups in the country, we thought that the polling station list was released a bit late to allow us to properly train, accredit and deploy our observers in the country. That should have been done earlier. The concerns concerning the voters' roll, some stakeholders still do not have the voters' roll. The voters' roll was given to political parties after the nomination court processes, and that is commendable. But there are concerns that that voters' roll is not searchable. And I think seeing we do have political parties in this room, political parties may have to advise us in terms of what format of the voters' roll was provided to them. Is it searchable? We've seen that there are groups that are analyzing the voters' roll. Where did they? Okay.
Thank you for your insights and for the great work that you are doing, and for sharing with us your observations of the pre-electoral environment, pre-election environment. Sipho, we'll hand over to you now. Your 8 minutes starts now.
Thank you so much. I am the son of a politician, so forgive me, I'm not used to 8 minutes. My father was the firebrand Chris knows him very well. So I speak here, I know it says I'm open society, but I speak here as a Zimbabwean. I put this down so that there's no question about what I'm saying and where it's coming from. We're talking about an election in a few days, but we need to look at the election in the context of 5 years. How have we got to where we are? What has shaped the conditions in which this election is actually taking place? This is my point of departure. We are talking about an election that happens in the context of a period of almost 2 years of COVID, in which political participation, political engagement was hugely curtailed by the pandemic, but in which that curtailment was skewed against the opposition. It's a fact. We are talking about an election that has happened in the context of a very active judicialization of politics and politicization of the judiciary. Unprecedented. We are talking about an election in which the civic space has narrowly shrunk further than what it had already, where we were open for business, but the space for engagement, for participation, for speaking, for expression shrank significantly, including the introduction of very, very restrictive legislation that curtails the freedom of participation, of expression, of assembly. I'm talking about the Patriot Act and the PVO bill. I've told myself that I will be arrested for the Patriot Act. Mkoma Chris, you will have to arrest me because I will completely ignore that act, as my father used to. I will not even worry about it. I'll say exactly what I want to say, as I've always said against Mugabe, and I'll continue to say it against Mkoma Chris, against President ED, because I believe that is how we will move forward. So, but these are realities. These things happened in the past few years. We're talking about unprecedented levels of credibility questions about the Electoral Commission. And I say unprecedented, not to say every Electoral Commission in the world over. I used to work on elections before at UNDP in Africa and across the world. Every Electoral Commission is open to criticism. You know, you can never do right as an Electoral Commission because it's a political contest. Nobody likes what you do, some of the decisions, some of the things you do. But the credibility is so important. The trust that you have in an Electoral Commission is so critical to whether people feel that the election itself is going to be fair, whether they feel that their vote is going to count. We're going into an election where the credibility of the Electoral Commission is an all-time low. All time. And some of it whittled even by the courts. So the courts say you are lying, you are not telling the truth as the commission. The commission, no, we are telling the truth. We registered these people, we nominated them on time. No, you are lying. So you have national institutions that are almost at war with each other. Forget ZANU PF at this point. Who's whittling the credibility of the Electoral Commission? Some of the national institutions. Right? The judiciary, all these cases, unprecedented number of pre-electoral disputes, but also an unprecedented speed with which the judiciary is dealing with them. Fascinating shift. It never happened. You might not know, you might not remember that Dexter Nduna remained a parliamentarian for 5 years while the case was stuck in court. But now the Supreme Court, you file something, in 3 days they give you a hearing. And in 24 hours they issue their decision. What is happening? Of course, it's great for some of us because it must function, but why? What's going on here? We have to ask ourselves those questions. We are talking about a context in which the campaign environment has significantly shifted, where there's a lot of money. There's a lot of money in politics. It's not just in Zimbabwe, by the way. I mean, in Kenya, the election, the money that went into the Kenya elections was about $300 million. In Nigeria, we don't even want to talk about it. I don't know, I can ask Comrade Chris, maybe Fadzai, they can tell us how much money they have. Some will say we have nothing, but you see the money that's going in, and the money goes in, it has to come back. Who is putting the money? And what are they going to get for the money? So we hear the gold is the currency now. Is the gold funding the elections? What does it mean? Is it the Chinese funding the elections? We hear that some are Western puppets, or some Eastern puppets. Who's funding the election? The Chinese are building roads, they are building the mines, they've got concessions. So we have to understand the Russians, they will want a payback. Whoever gives you money wants their money back. So we have to understand all this. Some of us, of course, we've always been anti-imperial. We've always said, well, even you see what's happening in West Africa. The point is simply that we're seeing a lot of money in politics. And we don't know where this money is coming from. And we don't know what this money is going to pay for and what is going to be paid back. And last and not least, I agree with my sister Barbara. The election has been unprecedentedly non-violent. There has been the latest incidents, and that's good because I think the ruling party learned from 2008 that violence can discredit the outcome, and that's why you then have all these 5 years of all these other legal things that I've talked about, all these very carefully crafted and curated other ways in which, of course, this ruling party has placed itself at an advantage politically as it goes into this election. So that's what I want to say. And I have 1 minute. Am I done?
You're done, Siposani.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thanks for your input. We'll move to Munjodzi. Over to you. Your 8 minutes starts now.
I'll put you back now.
Nice.
Good morning to everyone, and thank you to Chatham House for giving us the opportunity to give our views on the Zimbabwean election. And I must say that some of the views that we put here are basically informed and harvested from the immense work we have done as CELO in the past few years with regard to the Zimbabwean elections, but also the Zimbabwean context and other spots that we work from in the region. And I must say that it was chilling to hear some of the remarks that were coming from Chris. I mean, they really are chilling. That 14 days from an election, you get a sense that, in paraphrasing him, Chris is saying that forget about the opposition getting into power, and the question then becomes, if you are in an election and the ruling party doesn't win the election, what will happen? Would they cede power?
I will give you a chance during the Q&A, Chris. Let him finish. Yeah. So we can deal with that during the Q&A. Yeah.
And so I would want to say that. So that's one thing that's chilling, and it's the attitude that you get from those that have power in Zimbabwe that sort of worries us in terms of really ensuring that Zimbabwe achieves a credible, free, and fair election. But as a starting point, I want to say that for me, it is almost practically impossible. Madok, Fadzi, Chris, and Elizabeth, I don't see it. I see the hope you have in campaigning and the work you're doing as political parties, and I think that the results will come at some point, but it is practically impossible now for Zimbabwe to have a free and fair, credible election. And I say that on the basis of clear standards or minimum standards that have to be met for an election to be truly, genuinely an expression of the people's will. and of course the results will come out. And I know that there's been a lot of, was it not Edson Zobo, who is a nationalist, who was a former spokesperson at the time of ZANU PF, who said that how can an election be free and fair when it is guarded at its four corners by the ruling party's henchmen? That and this is 1979. ZANU PF was asking the same questions that I was hearing the panel that was here in front asking. And then some of the responses are to say that you have to do what we have done. And I think that we need as Zimbabweans to begin to say, how do we move from this toxic environment and begin to work together and move forward? I think that the past 5 years, as Sipho has highlighted here, have not built an electoral environment that cultures trust and confidence in the people of Zimbabwe on the outcome of an election. I think that we have not been able to sufficiently build the trust and credibility that is needed for citizens to believe that an election is a free expression of their will. It is my considered view that on the basis of, I'll pick just 4 pillars that come from the Africa Charter on democracy, elections and governance, and some that come from the SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections. It is my considered view on those bases that those 4 will prove that we are possibly beyond a stage where an election can be free and fair. But others will win. I mean, there will be winners. And there can be transition, even when an election, as Sipho says, it doesn't really have to be that elections are perfect. There will be problems, there will be challenges, but these ones, in my opinion, are. So the first thing I want to look at is the election management. That is the state of ZEC and its conduct. And one of the things that's worrying from ZEC for me has been the attitude displayed by the chair.
3 minutes, Manjotsi.
That was so fast.
You must be enjoying
so there have been a number. I remember the chair being asked to answer to some irregularities that have been unearthed, and she responded by simply saying that, and I'm paraphrasing, nothing short of an earthquake will stop the Zimbabwean election. And there is nothing wrong with saying that, because it is what you feel, but it is the attitude and the arrogance that then comes out that makes, I think, some of the opposition parties here feel that their views and their contributions cannot be heard. There is serious challenges that have been unearthed, irregularities on the voters' roll. And we have read reports from Pachedu, from other experts who are doing for analysis around the voters' roll. Fake IDs, alleged fake IDs are being unearthed. Hundreds of people living in one address. The voters' roll itself having serious challenges. I think others have said it needs to be searchable, and there are things that are problematic with the voters' roll, and the ability for ZEC to give the 12,300 polling station voters' rolls is an important parameter, and I think for political parties that has to be demanded, and I know that we'll get, so I'll jump the other things that I wanted to raise and go to the issue of resolving electoral disputes. The idea that we have been in court, and I saw yesterday someone already went to court challenging ZEC's change of the electoral law, is problematic. That we are in court every day, and it raises questions around, are the courts being used to determine an election outcome? Then access to state media. So I'm looking at the pillars that I'm saying, these are things that make me believe that it is impossible now to have a free and fair election. Access to state media. I've been watching the state media a lot, and it's minimal opposition appearance, almost none, because it's always almost negative when the opposition is on state media. it's non-stop ZANU PF chants, songs, and political rallies coverages. A clear blurring of the lines between the state and the party, and it manifests mainly in the, and these are our observations and views. And then the issue of the code of conduct for electoral actors. We believe that we have a law that gives us the code, but many have not observed it. The issue of violence that has been touched by many speakers, for me, when you talk about political violence, don't talk about the acts of someone beating someone. You need to go to the grassroots and understand the fear that people are subjected to on a day-to-day basis, and then gauge whether that election is really free of violence. And I think that there are many reports that, if you read ZPP's reports, they are quite clear that there has been a lot of intimidation that has been going on. So on violence, I think that the security forces, the partisan nature, or perceived partisan nature of the police is problematic. I think the case of the Deputy Minister, Barbara, who picked a call and was insulting an assistant commissioner at a police station, is testimony to the attitude and the arrogance that those that have power have with regard to how the institutions of the state must behave. And all these things sort of have skewed the election environment, in my opinion, in favor of ZANU PF and the ruling party.
Thank you very much, Majority. Your time is unfortunately up.
And I'll just say that I wanted to touch on women participation, but I see that STAR has done a competent job on that. I had a few recommendations, but I hope I'll come back to them during the
Thank you. Maybe we'll have a chance during the Q&A session, which I look forward to. Martin, we move on to you now. Your 8 minutes begins now.
Thank you, Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, I also thank Chatham House for inviting me to participate in this important and timely discussion, and I also thank the previous speakers. I should note that I'm speaking in my personal capacity. Allow me to begin with a quotation to situate elections in general, not specifically about Zimbabwe. The 2012 report of the Global Commission on Elections, Democracy and Security defined an election with integrity as, and I quote, "Any election that is based on the democratic principles of universal suffrage and political equality as reflected in international standards and agreements, and is professional, impartial, and transparent in its preparation and administration throughout the electoral cycle," end of quote. Over the last 22 years, I happen to have engaged in elections and African affairs, political affairs, good offices in a total of 47 countries. I have observed 48 elections in 33 countries, including in Zimbabwe. And what I thought I would best do in this time is to just identify 8 key lessons that I've learned from my electoral experience. These are as follows, and a lot of issues have been raised, so I'll not take long. The first lesson that I've learned is the importance of the political and security environment to the prospect of success or otherwise of any election. Elections everywhere or anywhere are fundamentally political processes with important technical elements. Thus, the first point is the need to foster and encourage political will and a political and security environment conducive to the holding of genuine, credible, transparent, and inclusive elections. Second, elections are by their nature adversarial. Tensions tend to rise. An election with integrity can serve as a tool of conflict prevention or resolution, and as a means to address, the root causes of conflicts. And there's also a need to address women and peace and security issues and challenges in any election. Third, to achieve the above, trust and confidence among electoral stakeholders, and this includes the civil society, the media, and so on, in the electoral process itself is vital. And dialogue among stakeholders is also essential. Experience has shown that the following 5 factors are crucial in this regard. That is, whether there is trust and confidence in an electoral process. The first is the rule of law, constitutionalism, and an appropriate legal framework that facilitates the exercise of political and civil rights and provides for legal redress. And this, of course, is to be found whether it's in the constitution, the relevant electoral legislation, the regulations of the Electoral Commission, and so on and so forth. So that is really an area that requires a close look, and that's what observers will be looking at. Then the next point, the 5th, is that what is really critical here is a professional, transparent, and independent election management body which inspires public trust and confidence throughout the electoral cycle. And now, just as somebody mentioned, the election is not just what is going to happen on the 23rd of August. It's what has been happening throughout the last 5 years of this particular electoral cycle. And the areas of inquiry that I think are really vital include, and are not limited to, the inclusivity of the voter registration, freedom of candidate nominations, freedom of the campaign, balance and tone of media coverage, participation rights of marginalized persons, including women, youth, minorities, and persons with disability, and so on, the neutrality of officials, the integrity of voting procedures, voting and procedures, and the right of voters to cast a secret ballot. Whether there are incidences of violence and intimidation and how such incidences are addressed, the integrity of the vote count, and results tabulation. 6th point is a democratic culture and the removal of all barriers to universal participation. There are all sorts of barriers to participation. They could be social, they could be economic, they could be administrative. Whatever these barriers, I think it's good. It's vital that these be identified and removed to expand participation. 7th, and this has been touched on briefly, and this is the need for regulation of uncontrolled, undisclosed, and opaque political finance. This is absolutely vital. I don't think it has been discussed enough, but for any credible election, this is an important thing. And then maybe the final point that I would like to talk about is this question of post-election. And I don't think we have discussed post-election sufficiently. But for now, what I would just say is that no election is perfect, and every electoral process has room for improvement. And in terms of what I've experienced globally is that the best post-electoral practice, yes, just one final point already, ideally should include the creation or the strengthening of whatever domestic mechanisms there are to review the conduct of an election and to review recommendations both of citizen observers and also international observers, and also the reports of the Electoral Commission itself. I presume that after an election, the Electoral Commission is supposed to produce a report to Parliament or to whoever about the elections. I think it's important that any country creates a mechanism where these are examined in detail to do a number of things. First of all is to determine what worked, what did not work, to look at what recommendations were made, and to consider prospective reforms and any lessons learned. The reason being that this is not the last election. There will be another election, and the best time to do this kind of review, I mean, that's what we have done, both in the UN, where we have worked, and also the Commonwealth Secretariat. The best time for such reviews are usually 6 to 12 months after the election, not on the eve of the next election. The purpose is to have enough time to embed, because some things require legislative reform, other things require procedural reform, so early in the electoral cycle is the best time, such that there's enough time to address these things. So really, in conclusion, the key things really, once again, are really political will, trust and confidence, and creation of the adequate political and security environment for credible, transparent, inclusive, and genuine elections. Thank you.
Many thanks, Martin. And thanks to my panelists for being cooperative in sticking to the time. This is the opportunity for us to engage with them, ask questions. I'll request you to say your name and your affiliation. I'll also request you to attempt as possibly as you can to be clear and concise in your questions or comments. So without further ado, I would like to see who would like to get us going with the Q&A. I can recognize the gentleman in front here.
Good. Thank you very much to the presenters. My name is Tafadzo Chikumbu. I'm a Zimbabwean citizen. I have a question for Martin. I'm happy that you gave us the standard in terms of indicators to look at in relation to electoral integrity. Based on your experience in the many countries that you have worked, what have you learned? And in your observation, especially for those countries that have violated those best principles, and specific to the experience of Zimbabwe, and then your pre-election view of what is obtaining in that country, what is your observation? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me take two more questions so that we have a round of three. Two more questions. Any takers? Okay, let's give Martin a chance to respond while you are thinking about your questions. Martin?
Okay, just first of all, I should mention that I have not set foot in Zimbabwe since 2002, so I don't think I'm in a position to discuss what is happening in this particular electoral cycle. The last election I observed in Zimbabwe was 2002, so I'm unable to comment on the Zimbabwe election. I think there are others who could do that, and I think it would be best to wait for the observers to make their view. And I think it's, as I said, it's good to look at an electoral process as a whole, and that this process is not complete, and I'm sure there will be many views expressed soon after the election. I think the broader question of what should be done about where things have been violated, I think just to remember that every election takes place within a particular legal environment. Yes, there are the international principles, there are the international frameworks that everybody agrees to, but then there's also national legislation. Every election in any country is run according to its own legislation. And I think there will be debate. There will be citizen observers, international observers, who will, and even when in every election I've observed, we observed within the prism of the international standards, but also within whether the elections were run according to the laws as exists in any particular country, with whether it conforms to the Constitution, the Electoral Act, the procedures at the polls. You have a manual that says this is the procedure. You say, did they follow their own procedure? Now, you may have recommendations how this procedure can be improved in the future, but those are two separate things. There are recommendations how something can be improved, and there's an observation of what happened according to the laws that exist. So I think those two things. And lastly, the question of pre-electoral view, I can't take a view because I have not set foot in Zimbabwe for 21 years.
Thanks, Martin. Can recognize the hand here.
Thank you, Chairperson. My name is Martin Iwi. I'm from the Institute for Security Studies. I also want to thank the panel for the excellent presentation. My point is really to find out from the panelists, given some of the malpractices that we have seen, and also the fact that a pact has been signed among the political parties to keep the peace. What is in place if things were to go wrong, either on the electoral day or after the elections, because of dispute over the result? Because we all know the atmosphere now in Zimbabwe is extremely tense, and one cannot really guarantee. So what if the parties fail to respect the pact? Is there a framework put in place by the country or by the international community? Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Who'd like to respond to Martin? I'll give each one of you a chance. Barbara?
Okay, that's fine. Thank you for that question. Allow me to take you back to the post-2018 elections, the January 19 disturbances. If you remember, if you recall, during that period, we had communities that were heavily affected by the political violence, and we had other communities that were not affected. So those that were perpetrating the violence, they went to some communities, and the community members or the community leaders in those areas, they said, not in this community. You are not going to burn our shops. You're not going to beat up people in this community. You're not going to loot from our shops. So there are community protection mechanisms that civil society has put in place that are waiting to respond for such occurrences. And I think that that's the best that we can do as civil society. But also let me mention that I do not know to what extent those community protection mechanisms are ready for this particular election, because civil society has really been disarmed because we are operating with very limited resources. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. Sipho Sami?
Thank you so much. I'll answer the question about contingencies, what will happen if things don't go well, related also to the point Martin made. You know, the big problem in Zimbabwe is that you have a ruling class that's driven by self-interest. We no longer have national interests as the critical determinant of how people in public service behave. If you had, then people would always do what is in the national interest. So it really doesn't matter because the ruling class is simply focusing on preserving its position. We have a predatory elite that's literally sucking everything from public service, public resources, public opportunities, economy, and everything is gravitating towards that small little elite. It doesn't really care, right? And it will then, of course, use its backup, which is the coercive apparatus of the state, to then move in to preserve whatever happens. So we've got an election that's already discredited. Under normal circumstances, in some places, people feel, no, my vote is so important to me, it's been stolen. I'm not happy with it. I'm going to protest, which is again a right in our constitution to protest. But you can't do that, because if you do that, if you protest, you will be killed. The police will be unleashed. And of course, then the police state will be unleashed on the people. So that's the problem that we have, that this election is not going to solve the crisis of legitimacy. And what will continue to happen is that the perception that the regime has won through crook and hook is going to persist, that you are illegitimate, that you wouldn't have won if the elections were truly and genuinely fair, you were never going to win. That perception is not going to go away, not just amongst the public, but amongst the regional actors and amongst the global actors as well. And therefore, people will not want to invest in that country. People will not embrace you. Even other Africans will be like, hang on a second. That's why we look at what's happening in West Africa, and we forget that in 9 of the 12 countries which have had coups in the past 5 years, in 9 of the 12 countries, the presidents subverted the constitution in many of those countries. They elongated their terms, they tried to stay longer, and these young soldiers said, hang on, not anymore. We are not saying that's what's going to happen in Zimbabwe, but if you keep having this, at some point in time, something will have to give, whether by public uprising or by the military or by somebody saying, it's your time is up. So that for me is the view. The election won't resolve the problems of Zimbabwe. I think it will actually exacerbate them. That's my view. Thank you.
So I think that you pose a very important question. And my starting point is that you need to look at what's happening in Zimbabwe today. There are many audios and videos, at least the citizens are trying to capture what's happening at political meetings when people are harassed and all those things. Unfortunately, most of them will be in Shona and it's difficult to share to international audiences. But what you get from those audios and videos is that you have a party, particularly the ruling party, that feels that they are above the law and no one, absolutely no one, can do anything to them. So this has not just been at the level of the national leadership, as you heard from Comrade Chris' attitude and arrogance, but it has also been at the very local level. Supporters are energized as ZANU PF supporters that no one will touch us. So an ordinary supporter, a card-carrying member with nothing, absolutely nothing except the card for the party, no job, no nothing, can actually move around telling supporters that we don't want to see NCA in this particular area. We don't want to see Triple C. And this is the problem I'm having, that we have entrenched this culture that there are people that are above the law and no one will touch them. So that's the first question. So what do you do when then there is a serious conflict on the election day? And I think the internal mechanisms Barbara talks about in civil society is quite important, because at the very least there are two things that I think must happen. The first one is that internally citizens must be able to validate the outcome of an election. Whatever ZEC says, citizens, whether the election, whether they agree or they don't agree, I think there should be a mechanism for citizens, because I think that's the starting point for us to begin to say, Zimbabweans, how do we address the challenges we face? But secondly, in the event of things getting out of hand, like they did in 2018, I think what is important is to have regional players, particularly the organ chair, the Troika chair in SADC, to really be on guard, to be able to say, how do we ensure that Zimbabwe doesn't have another cycle of violence after the election have been announced? I think that it is important to have a few statesmen from across the continent and the region to be in Zimbabwe, because as people say, politics is emotive. We need people that can be able to talk to the main protagonists in the event that things get out of hand and try to calm the situation. I'm not sure that we have enough mechanisms at regional level. We have them on paper, but in the event that someone disregard the protocols and all that, how do you enforce them? Have they been enforced anywhere in the region? Can we start with, so it's a difficult question, but I think the most important thing is to try and ensure that we at national, in the national legal framework, we try and ensure that the protocols and the principles we have signed to ratified are really part of our law and that we respect them. But it's the idea of attitudes as well that is more problematic for me. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Njoti. Martin?
Just a couple of points. There's the saying that prevention is better than cure. And in this context, the surest way of preventing such a situation is to actually conduct the elections such that in a manner which has 2 points. One, that it is seen as genuine, credible, inclusive, and transparent. And secondly, where the citizens, the voters, because remember the election is about citizens and voters making choices. To the extent that the citizens and voters believe that the results reflect the wishes of the majority, where they have trust and confidence in the outcomes of the election, that, quite frankly, is the best mechanism of preventing the situation that he talked of. But secondly, from experience of having supported many 48 observer groups, this is something at the back of the minds of people as they're putting together observer groups. And there's always an element. That is why, to the extent possible, you'll find that observer groups will be led by senior political figures, people with gravitas, people with experience, who have led countries, who have access to the leadership, because there'll be many points where there's a necessity to speak at the highest political levels. And that is one of the reasons why those groups are constructed in that particular manner, anticipating certain needs that can only be dealt with. And I should, maybe the final thing to mention is that observer groups will engage with each other regularly. In fact, in some elections, they are engaging with each other on a daily basis such that they are on top of what is happening, and if there's any good offices to be engaged in, they do that as early as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. I'll take the last round of questions. Can see 3 hands already. I recognize Christopher here in front. And I recognize Fadai here. You recognize? I'll take the 4 hands. Okay. We'll go for 5, okay? Good. We've got 3 hands. Let's go for...
Thank you. First, on a procedural matter, I was just telling Alex, I have to rush back to Harare, and I was trying to make arrangements so that I can be pre-booked, so that I can have more time with what is a very exciting discussion about Zimbabwe. I take Alex and Chatham House very seriously, and all the delegates who are here also very seriously. That's point 1. Number 2, I raised earlier on a point of order. I will vehemently defend the Zimbabwe state, because I know the pain of giving birth to it. That's when I said, if you challenge the state, then there's no basis for discussion about Zimbabwe, because the state makes it all possible to even have the elections which are here. I never took to the position which Jeffrey was trying to say that I was saying that we call for violence. No, I said I defend the Zimbabwe state. Some people don't want to respect the Zimbabwe state, and that's where we differ. We do that, then we part ways. The Zimbabwe state makes it possible to be where we are today. And it has a history, and you got to respect that history. If you challenge it, then you got to go the way we did to challenge the other state. And it's a painful way. And I don't know where you will do it from, because no other country is accepting to challenge the legitimacy of the Zimbabwe state. All the diplomatic embassies in Harare, the membership of the United Nations, belie to the fact that the Zimbabwe state is legitimate. I also want to say that we have had very good views expressed even from the main opposition about their respect of the Zimbabwe state. Even from the President Chamisa himself, he has no issues with the state of Zimbabwe. So I don't know why anybody, if the opposition is happy, why anybody should try to be unhappy with the Zimbabwe state. The other thing is about the voters of Zimbabwe. They are so enthusiastic about this election, and all the parties are campaigning. The voters in Zimbabwe, they like their democracy. They know the pain of that democracy. So they are the ones who should be the ultimate arbiter of the legitimacy or otherwise of the elections in Zimbabwe. Observers are there to observe. They should not be mistaken for monitors, because we monitor a state which is not sovereign. That was done in 1980 when the state was coming from pre-independence to independence. Now it's a sovereign state. We don't send observers to other countries, to Europe and elsewhere. There's this belief that only Africans need to be monitored and observed, which seems to be prevailing here. There could as well be people who are on this desk and elsewhere going to go and observe elections in America. Have you ever been invited by the American government to come and observe the elections? Well, ZANU PF has never been. We've never been. So if they invite you, it means you are their friend. If they don't invite us, then we are not their friend. Yes. So you see, the people have got their own preferences on the geopolitical stage. Imperialism, most of the investment in Zimbabwe is private money. In fact, all of it. The person who hates state money for investment is me, because I know what it can do. We had British companies, they came and said they are selling a plane called BA-140. It said the airport for 30 years later, it never flew. It came from London. It's a white elephant. We had a British company come to Zimbabwe, set up a diesel power plant, Agreco. It was never fired. People talk of Chinese, talk of this, having white elephants and dirty trips. They don't talk about this behavior by Western countries which are saying dirty trips. This is deliberately manipulating the Zimbabwean country to buy British products which were then not supported by and they never performed, but nobody spoke about it. The Chinese, the Turkish people come, the Russians, the Indians come, then all of a sudden everybody wants to monitor those countries. Capital is neutral, it has no color. And the investors who are coming to Zimbabwe today, they are billionaires on the global stage who are investing in America. The steel plant company is investing in Philadelphia for the Department of Defense in America. This is the investment which is making Zimbabwe make a difference. We are not a country which is giving out freebies to anybody. People are going to the market in Sydney, they are going to the market in Toronto to buy assets of lithium. If your countries come, the countries which are your friends want, send your business people, they can come and buy those assets on the market and they can invest. But to simply say because there are new players in Zimbabwe, it's wrong, it's not right.
Thank you, Chris. Fazai?
Access to state media. We now have 6 licenses in Zimbabwe. If your party has no money to go and pay for advertisement to all 6 state stations, it's your problem. Get the money to go and pay so that you advertise for your party. We have money because we have empowered our people. They are now gold miners. They pay. There's no gold which is being smuggled in Zimbabwe because only the central bank trades gold on the global market. This nonsense about Al Jazeera. If there was smuggling of gold in Zimbabwe, somebody would have been stopped producing gold because it means there's no complete cycle of business. Somebody stops. If I steal here, you will not continue to give me coffee. You stop. But the whole gold system is going on well because everybody is getting what is fair to him. So they are just mean because we've used gold to support our currency, and that's why they are attacking it. We will make sure that the sovereignty of Zimbabwe in the currency sector is protected by using gold, which God gave us in abundance. I thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Fadzai, over to you.
Thank you. Mine is actually a question. I'm concerned, since most of you represent civic society in one form or the other, about the normalization of inflammatory rhetoric by ZANU PF, especially against CCC. I think earlier on, Mr. Mchangwa said, look, if you don't like this Zimbabwe, go to war and make your own, and everybody laughed. But those kind of statements really should shock the conscience of any society. In 2022, during the by-election period, the deputy leader of their party said the CCC should be crushed like lice. Within a month, there was a violent attack at one of our rallies and one of our members died. We all know what happened to Mo Blessing Ali. On Thursday last week, Tinashe Chitsunge was killed. And instead of the police charging those responsible with murder, they say it's public violence. No, he got run over. And we just continue each day like it's normal. There has been such a diminishing of the respect of human life. It's not a crime to wear a yellow shirt. It's not a crime to say we challenge government. In fact, if you read Section 67, Mr. Mchangwa, there's a constitutional right to challenge government policy. So you don't get to come here and say you can't challenge it or we go to war. No. Zimbabwe is for everyone. And so I'm concerned and would like to hear a comment from civic society. I know the PVO bill exists. And if that's what's muting comment on these clear human rights violations, then let it be known. And Martin, you said prevention is better than cure. We don't want to start panicking about Zimbabwe where you've got a real big crisis. We've been very responsible as the CCC about how we report violence. It doesn't mean it doesn't take place, but we don't want to induce fear in communities. we also have a situation where this same styled government will say all sorts of things. Remember when they said Chamisa should be killed? Complete and utter silence from civic society. Are we saying the lives of CCC members don't matter and they should just go out there? They destroy our billboards. They say we can't do this. You can't get a venue. They chase us away. 102 rallies banned. And people look at that and act like it's all normal because it's happening to the CCC. I mean, imagine if it had been CCC members who had caused the death of a ZANU PF member. They'd be up in arms, but no, because it's CCC, they seem not to care. We really need stronger condemnation of what's clearly violent, unconstitutional conduct. And when the war was fought, it was fought for everyone. They fought a liberation war so that everybody is liberated, not just a few of the gold mafia, a few elites in ZANU PF. It has to be freedom for everyone.
Thanks, Fadzai. The gentleman over there, two hands. I'll start with him and then you, and then we end here. Yeah. Sure.
My name is Dino Ndiovu. I also, like the other questionnaires and also contributors to this conversation, identify as a Zimbabwean. So my first point of call would be to probably My name is Dino Ndlovu, and like the other contributors to this conversation, I identify as a Zimbabwean, and this is a very emotive and personal conversation for me. And my first port of call would probably be to contribute towards what Honorable Fadzai said, which is as the civil space, it is important for us to contribute towards the condemnation. But I also want to stand in defense of the civil space to say that there's also been a victimization of that same civil space that tries to stand in solidarity, not only with CCC, not only with some certain elements of ZANU PF or other opposition parties, but parties that are generally trying to make Zimbabwe a better space. The reason why people find or work in civil space is to generally improve Zimbabwe in terms of legislature, in terms of trying to make sure that people generally have a better life. But a broader contribution towards what she said, which is something that I was feeling before she raised it, was the idea of emotive language that is used within the Zimbabwean political space that is meant to dehumanize people that exist in the other, people that exist with political opinions that are divergent to yours. I think tackling that type of framing, tackling that type of how we identify people that exist within the opposition or exist within the civil space allows for violence to be visited upon those people. She raised an example about how certain people are considered as fleas. At a point at which people are identified as something other than human, it normalizes someone in a raw area to treat those particular people as something that is not a human, like a chicken that can be beheaded, that can be killed. So I think it is important for us as we move forward as a country, not only to perceive violence as only something physical, but to also perceive violence as something that is structural, as something that is verbal, as something that is judicial, as something that is beyond just beating someone up, because all these other things have the same effect on people, or very often lead to the same effect on people. So as political parties present here, including the ruling party and those that are trying to be the ruling party, I hope the next 13 days are days where we have reasonable, mature politics, where if someone does not agree with you, they are not a traitor, they are not a rat, they are not lice, but they are people who deserve dignity even if they are in opposition.
Thanks, Dion.
Good afternoon to all. My name is Mark Msipa. I represent, or I am based with a financial institution, but I'm asking this question in my personal capacity to the panel. My question to you is, over the last 15 years, we've seen Zimbabwe have arguably 3 administrations. Previously, there was the government of national unity, and then there was the prior administration under President Mugabe, and now we have the Second Republic. In your views, has the election infrastructure and management improved over the last 15 years? And my second part to that question is there a regional model that you have seen work well, such that for future elections, that can be the gold standard by which ZEC and other key players can move towards? Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Gentleman over here.
Thank you very much, and a very good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Tapiwa Chagonda, and I work at the University of Johannesburg. So many thanks to the panelists for the most fascinating presentations. So given Siposami's very bleak assessment of the elections, colleagues, what's then your take on a post-election scenario where we have a second government of national unity, given the extent of political polarization and the possibility of having an election whose results are likely to be highly contested? Won't this at least help ease political tensions, at least in the short term? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed. The very last question at the back. I see many hands. I know we've run out of time, over time actually. It's almost 2 o'clock now. But I see 2 more hands in the front.
Thank you to the esteemed panel. My name is Brian Tamuka Kagoro. I am a self-employed youth. I have one seemingly irrelevant question. My brother Chris Mtrangwa, you know, when I was still active nationally, anyone who said compensate white farmers was a sellout. But I see that you and your government compensating white farmers, and absolutely no reference to the 500,000 black farm workers who were evicted as this happened. Is this a pro-imperial or anti-imperial position? I'm talking not about the compensation. I'm talking specifically about your government's amnesia with respect to black farm workers. And then secondly, you know, depending on where one sits with respect to Tongogara. Tongogara was asked this question with respect to elections. In fact, there are only 2, there are 5 courts, but there are only 2 quotable courts with respect to elections by the liberation heroes. So Tongogara's view was what we are fighting for in terms of elections is free, fair, and credible elections in which everyone has a chance to contest, no matter their views. Now, which seemed strange because the only other view other than the nationalist view was a Rhodesian fascist racist view, but Tongogara still at the time claimed that he was fighting even for that view to be heard because as he explained elsewhere, his vision of liberation was a space where no one would be criminalized. So what is your party's vision of liberation? Is it different from Tongogara? Is it the same as Tongogara? If it's the same as Tongogara, what is the place of contrarian views? So other than myself, who's anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist, pan-Africanist, is in your party's imaginary, does there exist a space for someone who actually holds a capitalist and who does not hold the same view as people like myself? Yeah.
Thank you for the voice of the self-employed youth. Thanks, Brian. Colleagues, I'm more inclined to just take the questions that have been posed. See lots of hands. At some stage, we have to bring this to a close. We are being brought to the panel again by Brian. Thanks to Brian. Yeah. So let's take the answers to the questions. And if there is still appetite to take the last questions, we'll test that. But we are out of time. Chris? Yeah. I'll allow my panelists to respond before we respond and make closing remarks, because we are already out of time, unfortunately. That just shows how significant this event is, and we cannot thank Chatham House enough. Dr. Chitoyo, Chitio and Alex, Chris, and Hannah, and all the colleagues from London that brought us all here. It's really been a very informative and energizing discussion. I'll hand over to my panelists.
I don't know. I mean, I'll try. I'll try the question on the. You said there's a bleak assessment. I mean, we talked about the 5 years. We talked about going into the election. Some of the more significant challenges to this particular election, and what the prospects are post-election. So, and whether there can be a GNU and so on and so on. You know. Periods after the election are for people who prioritize national interests. Any period after the election should be a period of self-reflection, of serious and significant self-reflection that says, wait a minute, I saw so many people during the electoral period supporting these other people, and they voted for these other people. It means that I'm governing without a mandate of everybody. So a nationalist, and I say this, whether it is opposition or ruling party, a nationalist would use the post-electoral period for self-reflection, for saying, how do I win those that are not with me? How do I unite this country that seems to be so divided? Whether it is on religion, whether it is on whatever it is, that would ideally be, and I'm saying ideally, be what should form the basis of what you'd call a consociational arrangement, where you say, okay, wait, I've won, but I really haven't won, right? I've won maybe 50.3%, which was in 2018. That would have been an important period for self-reflection by, for example, the ruling party to say, wait, I don't have everybody here. I only have 50%. Where are these other 50%? So, and I'm not saying that that's a case for a government of national unity per se, but that's a case for reflecting on your own policies and how you take into account the fact that you don't represent everybody. This builds on what Brian was asking. Anyway, but you aspire to do so. You aspire to win over people. You aspire to show them that democracy is really not about the majority, by the way. The beauty of democracy is its protections of the minority, because the majority is already protected by the victory of the election, right? Because the victory takes power. The people who are victorious in a democracy take power. And the tenets of democracy are the principles around protection of minorities, around inclusion, around equality, around fairness, because you already have power. If you have power, you can't exclude everybody. But for me, I'll say this, and I say it in earnest. We must remember that nothing is ever static. ZANU PF should prepare one day to be opposition. And if ZANU PF was opposition, how would it want to be treated, for example? Because what usually happens, we start having pendulums. We start hearing HH is now arresting Lungu. HH is now prosecuting Lungu. HH is now taking away the soldiers from Lungu. He's now taking away. So basically, we need to plan for tomorrow. We must always plan for the day we are not in power. We must always also plan for the day we are in power, because there's retribution as well. So if CCC was to win today, we will be holding CCC to account the same way we're holding ZANU PF to account. We'll be saying, you have no right to arrest people. You have no right to be retributive and to be punitive, etc. So for me, I think this is an important moment to your question of important self-reflection for the leaders. Our comrades who are ruling, they went to the war, no doubt, but they have children. They are going to die at some point. Some of our fathers went to the war as well, have died. We have now our children. The question is, they won't be there forever. The question is, what kind of country do we want to leave to our children and their children? That for me is, I guess, in closing. So I'm not so bleak. I believe there's nothing as constant. The only constant is change. I said when I think my brother Chris was outside, you missed this and I'll repeat it in your presence. I said, you see what's happening in West Africa is fascinating. And really, in those countries where we are seeing coups, Niger, Burkina, Guinea, Mali, and these youngsters, young people, captains, corporals that are saying, no, it's enough, Madala, you go. In your coup was a bit different. It was the Madalas who were saying, Madala, you go. Madala, you are a Madala, you are. And I remember, I mean, he even almost got arrested. He was persecuted. We know that. We know what happened. We know your role there. But the point we're saying is that what's actually happening, the young people are going to take over, whether we like it or not. Even the young people inside ZANU PF will take over ZANU PF.
Thank you, Sipho.
Because they are just so much more than the old people. That's what is going to happen
Thanks a lot.
at some point.
Thank you very much, Sipho.
So I will not take, I think I'll take just one or two questions. But this is the thing with power, is that when you have it, it feels like it will never go. But also when it's not there, it might feel like you will never have it. And that's why I think constitutions must be written on the basis of mistrust, that a human being is inherently capable of being corrupt. And so we must safeguard ourselves. So far, I think that language matters in everything we do. That's why at a personal level, but also if you check my work where I've been, every time there is a human rights violations, if we are able to issue a statement, we try to do that. And I think in defense of the Zimbabwean civil society, people have tried to really stand up and say, this is not right, this is not right. But we are limited in terms of what we can do. We can just release statements, and at times it's not enough. But also, I think that we need to see. I think that question comes in sort of solidarity among pro-democracy forces. When civil society goes through some tough times, you as political actors also need to support us. Civil society was battling with the PVO bill, trying to engage government, we also feel that we didn't hear enough voices from yourselves, from NCA, from many other pro-democracy movements. So I think that the solidarity, every struggle, if there is a struggle we are fighting in Zimbabwe, has to be built on solidarity, not just among Zimbabweans, but across the region. But I do think that as leaders, especially political leaders, we must know that our attitudes, the attitudes we show, the language we say, has serious results, particularly to those that follow us on the ground. And that's where the devastation can happen, that you sign a peace pact in Harare, but a supporter who is in Chendambuya says, go to hell with your pact. I will not see a CCC or an NCA or a ZANU PF supporter in this area because of what we say. And I go back to the language. I've been listening to audios, trying to work on something around the audios that I've been listening to of political leaders campaigning in places that we might never know. In a ward in Kenzamba, a political leader then says, you must know that there is no way that we are going to let you win. We have been to war and all that kind of language. And I think those words are difficult. And then on the issue of, what could happen after the election.
Try and sum up quickly, please.
Yeah, in 30 seconds. Like Sipho was saying, I also think that we don't have to look at the 2023 election as an end in itself. It must be an opportunity of how we progressively become a better society by building systems, trying to perfect systems as we go. But of course, there will be serious concerns in the event that there is a real conflict. What mechanisms we will be having in place to ensure that things don't get out of hand. But I think 2023 is an opportunity to prepare for a better 2028 in the sense of elections, for 2033, and you go on. And the idea is, how do we continue to merge our legal framework with the regional standards that we have all agreed to ensure that the election environment is conducive and produces a true and genuine expression of the people's will.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other comments quickly? Yeah, Pablo.
Just to comment on first the issue of political violence, Fadzi, that you raised. I think as the Election Resource Center, we have consistently issued statements condemning political violence. And I'm sure some of you in this room would agree with me that despite, the chilling effect of the PVO amendment bill, we as the ERC, we have tried to ensure that those that do not have a voice at least get to have a voice. Dino, you spoke about the language that we use, and I think that's something that Munjozi has already commented on, and I agree that we need to be careful how we express ourselves or how we, condemn processes, because we are all Zimbabweans at the end of the day, and we have one country, and we are all, we don't have any other country. So when we try and monopolize Zimbabwe and say Zimbabwe is ours, and those that condemn things that are not going right in the nation are no longer Zimbabweans or do not deserve to be Zimbabweans, I think that is not right. I am hoping that one day I'll sit in a room where as Zimbabweans we are going to talk about issues that affect our nation without necessarily labeling each other or without necessarily considering the other person's view as as lesser than our own views. So I hope that we can build a peaceful country, because I also hope that one day I can sit in a room and not be afraid to really speak, without fear of what will happen to me when I get to the airport. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. Martin?
Maybe just one final point. Somebody raised a question about regional models. I think there's a place to see what worked and has not worked in your own country, but also what I can say as what has happened in the region and what has worked well with your neighbors, comparative countries. Lessons learned can be adapted to your own country. So there is room for that. And finally, there's also plenty of electoral assistance available. If there is political will and if they are invited, there's always room for political electoral assistance or advice to be given. But certainly the region would be a very good place to start. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Chris, Brian has made you part of this panel. We welcome you. There are questions posed to you. I'll give you this opportunity to respond to Brian's question. Thanks.
Brian, about compensation. Yes, we are compensating the white farmers. We are compensating for the improvements on their farms, on the farms which they used to own. In the bank, there's a balance sheet. There's a balance sheet about the title deeds of a piece of land. Do you hear? Oh, okay. Yeah, in banks in Zimbabwe and elsewhere in London, they've got accounts. There's a balance sheet. It consists of two things: the land, which is the title deed, and the loans which were borrowed to improve that particular piece of land. The title deeds are a creation of colonialism. They conquered and they gave themselves title deeds. We set up an army in the 60s and 70s. We reconquered and reversed those title deeds. So we cannot pay for that which we won by blood. So the title deeds are not being compensated because they're a product of colonial occupation. But land improvements, which makes a farm be productive for the future use of the new owners, dams, connecting electric connections, all these things, they deserve to be compensated because the banks which lend that money must continue to be in business in order to lend money. So that is the distinction. It is not in any way pandering to imperialism. We are just trying to follow proper financial management. Land was improved upon, compensate. I hope it explains where we are today with the global compensation agreement, and it's within the constitution of Zimbabwe. I want to answer Fadzai. She knows, and her president has said it, they are appreciative of the role of the police in the Glenview violence. The whole night, the CID and the law and order, they spent looking for the culprits of that heinous murder. We condemned it as the party. It is no, ZANU PF does not sit as, I am a member of the political bureau of ZANU PF. There was no way where we set at headquarters in ZANU PF to say we are going to murder somebody in Glenview. It never came out of it. So if there is wayward action, which is done by at certain levels, which is outside of the law, it is the behavior of that person alone and not of the party ZANU PF. And the police are dealing with that matter in the most thorough and ruthless manner without fear or favor. We should be able to commend our police when they start doing a good job. But to try to condemn the same police which is protecting you to make sure that we have elections which are running properly in a fora like this, and you lump it, that's where the bad PR of this party comes in, because they have an antipathy to the state. If you have an antipathy to the state, you cannot then expect that tomorrow you go to them and try to find a convivial relationship. We must agree that the Zimbabwean state is sacrosanct. It makes us be what you are. And that's what I'm finding from your leader, and you are trying to play to the gallery here and try to express a different view. We shouldn't do that. The police is doing their work. And I just want again to remind people, as a liberation movement, we are the first liberation movement in history to go for elections before we became independent. We didn't go from bullet to office, we went from ballot to office. Please respect us. We respected democratic tenets. We will never be perfect. No countries ever be perfect. We are talking about persecution of the presidents. If I ask Mr. Trump today, he will probably say I'm being persecuted in American politics. So there will always be imperfections. Let's have goodwill towards each other. But the most important thing is let's safeguard those institutions of continuity in society. And the state is the most important institution of continuity. If we agree on the legitimacy of the state, all of us here, most of the issues we are talking about, they disappear. But this gratuitous attack on the Zimbabwean state is what makes me, it incensed me, because I know the sacrifice which I went through and my colleagues to make the Zimbabwean state be what it is. Fear, everybody talks about fear. We're from ZANU PF. Try to imagine fear of an American Congress passing a law against your country and saying your party must be out of power. That's a big, and you have no capacity, anybody of you, to emit fear, to commit fear, which the American state can. Ask the Iraqis, ask the Libyans, ask the Afghans.
Thank you, Chris.
So this is very important to bear in mind.
Thank you very much.
We know who our enemies are. I thank you.
Thank you. Just colleagues, in closing this panel, let me mention three things. We're all here because we want a peaceful, stable, and prosperous Zimbabwe. Secondly, a prosperous Zimbabwe is key to unlocking the full potential of SADC. SADC can't prosper if Zimbabwe doesn't prosper. And lastly, the elections that are happening in 13, 14 days' time are really a great opportunity and moment for Zimbabwe to set the basis for it to trade and invest itself out of the socio-economic challenges that we've all been talking about. And let's hope that the elections go well and that they'll be free and fair, that the post-election environment will set the basis for a reset of the economic path of Zimbabwe and SADC and the rest of Africa. To Alex and his colleagues, thank you very much. And to my panelists, thanks a lot.
Just stay down for a moment. Thanks, Mojosi. Thank you, Khoseni, and the panel. Just a couple of final remarks, thoughts, and notices. First of all, obviously everything here was on the record. It's being filmed. We at Chatham House will try as quickly as possible to get this whole discussion up online. For those who have registered here, all of you, we'll make sure you get that. We'll email that out to you. So that's the first thing. Secondly, Tomorrow, if you don't know about it, the HSRC of South Africa is leading a discussion on Zimbabwe's elections from 9:30 to 12:30. My colleague, Dr. Knox Chitiyo, will be attending. It's at the Sheraton in Pretoria, but is a hybrid event. If you're interested and you don't have the details, I can provide you those. So there is continuing discussion about the importance of Zimbabwean elections. We ourselves at Chatham House will also, after the elections, whoever succeeds in the elections, we will be looking at what the policies are and this whole issue about economic prosperity. And so that's very important for our own work agenda, so we will be continuing on that. And finally, two other things. One is that lunch will be on the 13th floor. I can't promise that there'll be sadzo and chubuku, but you can maybe see. Some of our guests who've come in from Harare will need to be going and won't be with us. Others will be. And that the final thing is to thank all of you, panelists, especially those who've come down, including for the day from Harare, but also other guests who have come in for this meeting. Very grateful. You've enriched the debate and discussion. So thank you to you. And